Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Roksana Sikorski. Lorraine and Jeffrey Sikorsky were a happy married couple, they living in a beautiful dream home in a prosperous small town in Michigan, which had a population of under 10,000. Lorraine worked as a nurse, while Jeffrey was an engineer. They have successful careers and good incomes, however, they feel deprived without children. Both Lorraine and Jeffrey deeply wanted to become parents. They often found themselves enviously watching their neighbors' children go to school, realizing that they were missing the joy of parenthood. In 2004, after careful consideration, they decided to adopt their child. However, they quickly realized that adoption was difficult and had many hurdles. In search of a solution, some friends suggested a simpler option: travel to Poland to adopt there. Then, they contacted an orphanage, received approval to adopt, and traveled to Poland to select a child. They even thought about adopting more than one child. Lorraine was particularly drawn to a 4-year-old girl named Roksana, she feeling a strong emotional bond with her. As they talked, Roksana began to call Lorraine Mom, which filled Lorraine with joy. Feel secure about your choice. Jeffrey also liked Roksana and supported the decision. Lorraine and Jeffrey discovered that Roksana had a younger brother and sister who lived in the same orphanage. The siblings had been removed from an unstable family and were very close to one another, with Roksana taking care of them as the oldest. Lorraine and Jeffrey decided to adopt all 3 children together so they wouldn't be separated. They believed it was important for the siblings to grow up together. Excited to return home, they envisioned their new life as a big, happy family filled with the sounds of children laughing. Their dream became a reality when they completed all the necessary paperwork and returned home with their 3 new children. Lorraine and Jeffrey's 3 adopted children quickly adapted and settled into their new life. Their children find studying English very easy. Jeffrey continued working, while Lorraine took a break from her job to care for the home and children. Then, children started school and had no difficulties with their studies. The family was attached and happy for 10 years, until Roksana entered her teenage years. In 2014, at 15, Roksana started having behavioral issues. She rebelled, spent all day playing computer games, do poorly in school, and stopped listening to her parents. Worried about Roksana's behavior, Lorraine and Jeffrey reached out to a psychologist for help. Roksana was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. She received medication and was later diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, which stemmed from neglect and abuse in her childhood. This disorder affects a child's ability to form an emotional relationship with a foster parent and can lead to fear, hypervigilance, difficulty interacting with peers, and exhibit aggressive behavior towards self and others. Therapy had a positive impact on Roksana, helping her feel calmer. However, her life took a turn when a guy named Michael Angelo Rivera reached out to her on social media, claiming to be 18 years old. Roksana was thrilled to receive attention from him. Michael, a high school student, who was 4 years older than Roksana, began chatting with she. He praised her, making her feel comfortable and special. She shared her story of being adopted and the difficulties she had faced, and Michael listened empathetically, making her feel understood. One day, Michael invited Roksana to meet him, and she accepted. She dyed her hair, got dressed, and headed to the library to meet him. Roksana was petite and weighed only 40 kilograms, which made her seem fragile. Michael was captivated by her. Their meeting went well, and from then on, they started seeing each other at the library every day. Her parents were unaware that she was talking to Michael. They believed she was only going to the library to study and that her meetings with Michael were just coincidental. Later on, it was revealed that Michael was actually 23 years old, not 18 years old like he said, making him 8 years older than Roksana. Despite this age difference, Roksana was so blindly in love with him that she didn't even realize it. This was her first love, and she was already fantasizing about marrying Michael to escape her parents' disapproval, hoping they could live happily together. Roksana had difficulty bonding with her adoptive parents because of her mental illness, reactive attachment disorder. Although her parents cared for her, but she quickly became more deeply attached to Michael. To outsiders, their relationship appeared unhealthy. Her friends warned her against dating Michael because he appeared much older, but Roksana dismissed their concerns, thinking they were just jealous since they didn't have boyfriends. As a result, Roksana started to pull away from her friends and family, spending all her time with Michael. She was often with him and rarely came home. Her parents, Lorraine and Jeffrey, noticed her changed behavior and eventually learned about her boyfriend. They were taken aback. To them, Michael seemed too mature, and they felt the age gap was inappropriate, fearing it could lead to negative outcomes. Lorraine and Jeffrey read their messages and recognized that their relationship was not healthy. Roksana's parents had a serious conversation with her, asked her to stop all contact with Michael. However, Roksana strongly opposed this request, telling her parents that she couldn't imagine her life without him, which alarmed them. In response, her parents took away her phone to prevent her from communicating with Michael and began to closely monitor her activities. Despite this, Roksana continued to find ways to reach out to him. Roksana's parents had a hard time reaching her, but she refused to listen. Michael started visiting their house at night, and Roksana would sneak out through the window to meet him. One night, the police discovered them in a car together and sent Roksana home. This situation had worsened, prompting Jeffrey and Lorraine to discuss taking drastic measures, as they suspected that Roksana and Michael were involved in a sexual relationship. Roksana's parents took her to meet the doctor for a checkup, and their worst fears were confirmed. Outraged, they decided to hold Michael responsible for corrupting their daughter. They collected DNA evidence so they could report him to the police. However, their plan failed when the police refused to accept the report, as Roksana claimed that everything had been consensual and that she was not raped. Although the police had seen Roksana and Michael in the car earlier, and they knew that Michael was much older than her, they took no action. Roksana's parents were very worried and did not want her to get involved with Michael. So they decided to take the case to court to protect their daughter from him. After Roksana learned of this, she begged her parents not to proceed, but they were resolute, leading to a tragic outcome. Michael was aware of Roksana's parents' intentions against him, which upset him. Both he and Roksana wanted to escape to a distant place, but they lacked the financial means to do so and feared Roksana's parents would search for them. Consequently, they devised a malicious plan to eliminate the obstacle posed by Roksana's family, believing it would allow them to be happy together. At around 2 a.m. on October 17, 2014, 15-year-old Roksana entered her 12-year-old younger brother's bedroom holding a knife. She approached his bed while he was asleep, covered his mouth with her hand, and began stabbing him in the throat. The boy screamed, and Roksana left him bleeding and went to her 11-year-old sister's room. Their parents rushed to help the boy and were horrified by what they saw. They looked into Roksana's room and found her standing by her bed with the knife. Roksana was frozen in place. Their father, Jeffrey, quickly grabbed her. Meanwhile, Michael, who had been waiting outside, was on the phone texting Roksana to check on her. As the parents called 911, Roksana seized the opportunity to jump out of the window and escape to meet Michael. Doctors arrived and assisted the injured boy, who was crying and covered in blood. Thankfully, he survived and made a full recovery. The police placed Roksana and Michael on the wanted list, and they were eventually arrested in Detroit at Michael's apartment, where they were planning their wedding. Roksana was charged with attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, while Michael faced 7 charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. Turns out, Roksana and Michael devised a plan to eliminate her entire family. Roksana was supposed to kill her family members one by one, starting with her younger brother, then her sister, and finally her parents. Fortunately, the plan did not succeed. The night before the incident, Roksana and Michael were texting. During their conversation, Roksana began to panic and reconsidered her decision, realizing that these were her biological siblings, whom she had cared for in her childhood, and she loved her adoptive parents. Despite Roksana's change of heart, but Michael pressured her by saying that he was just there to make sure it happened. Under his influence, she took a knife and went to confront her younger brother. Due to Roksana being only 15 years old, there was a debate about how she should be tried. The prosecutor argued that the severity of the crime warranted treating her as an adult, and the judge concurred. Roksana was placed in a juvenile detention center but was later moved to a psychiatric clinic for treatment. Roksana's parents pleaded for leniency on her behalf. They preferred that she receive treatment in a clinic rather than face imprisonment. They held Michael responsible for the incident, claiming he manipulated Roksana and coerced her into committing these serious offenses. They believed she was unable to understand her actions due to her illness, which made her reliant on him. In court, Roksana apologized to her parents for not meeting their expectations and promised to do better. Her parents hired a skilled lawyer, spending $30,000 to help ensure their daughter remained free. However, after that, Roksana was assigned a public defender. The public defender advised her to accept a plea bargain with the prosecution to reduce her sentence, and she ultimately agreed. Roksana pleaded guilty only to assault with intent to murder and received a prison sentence of 10 to 20 years, with the possibility of parole in 2024. Roksana's parents think the sentence is unfair and too severe for their daughter, who they believe was influenced by Michael. They feel that Michael should face the harshest penalty. Lorraine, 54 years old, Roksana's mother, expressed to the press her urgent need for psychological support. She is concerned that her daughter is still at risk and that being in an adult prison could seriously damage her already vulnerable state. Lorraine also questioned how this sentence could truly help her daughter, arguing that it does not serve justice. Lorraine criticized the public defender, believing he was uninterested in protecting Roksana's interests. Instead of fighting for her, he made a deal that sent her to prison. The family was unaware that Roksana intended to make this deal. Had they known, they would have advised her against it. Lorraine is convinced that if there had been no deal, the jury would have found Roksana not guilty. Roksana's father, Jeffrey, who is 50 years old, was upset with the way the trial was conducted. He worried about Roksana's safety in prison, as she is still very young and vulnerable. Their concerns grew after Roksana threatened to harm herself, intensifying their fears about her future. The parents also blamed the police for not arresting Michael, who was found in a car with Roksana despite having an inappropriate relationship with her. They believed that if the police had taken appropriate action, Roksana's situation could have been prevented. The trial of Michael began, during which he blamed Roksana for everything. He claimed that it was her decision and plan, insisting he was not present at the crime scene and only supported her from outside. However, their correspondence contradicted his claims, showing that he was the one who directed her actions and masterminded the operation. As a result, Michael Angelo Rivera was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After listening to her parents, Roksana withdrew her guilty plea, blamed her defense attorney, and requested a new trial, but her request was denied. She is currently serving her sentence in the Women's Correctional Colony of Huron Valley. Since the attack, Roksana's siblings have undergone significant changes. They experienced severe psychological trauma and needed rehabilitation. For a long time, they were unable to sleep in their own rooms and suffered from nightmares. Thankfully, their mother reports that their lives have recently improved, and the children are now looking forward to Roksana's return home. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Vanessa Marcotte. On August 7, 2016, 27-year-old Vanessa Marcotte visited her mother, Roksana, in Princeton, Massachusetts. Vanessa, an active person who enjoyed outdoor activities like walking, yoga, and running, decided to go for a run on that warm and sunny day. She was scheduled to take a bus to New York City later that day, where she worked and lived. However, Vanessa failed to return home after her run, which was unusual for her. Her concerned mother, Roksana, sought help from the police. The case drew widespread national media attention due to its rarity in Princeton, which had not seen a similar incident in 30 years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She was an exceptional student and graduated with highest honors from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. After college, she worked at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston, before becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Every couple of months, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000. As an only child, Vanessa's mother, Roksana, cherished their time together and looked forward to her daughter's visits. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road around 1 p.m. to go for a run before catching the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she planned to run in was familiar to her. However, when several hours passed and Vanessa failed to return, her mother grew concerned and contacted the police. Officers promptly launched a search, focusing on the route Vanessa was expected to have taken. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog tracked a scent to a densely vegetated area about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Roksana Marcotte's home. There, the search team found the body of a woman, who was quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination revealed that her death was a result of a crime. Vanessa's body was found without clothes, and it had burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The location where the body was discovered was secluded, with no nearby houses, only the road and woods on either side. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, and despite a thorough search of the surrounding area, police were unable to find them. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had intentionally taken these items to avoid leaving behind DNA evidence. A sneaker with burn marks was found next to the body, and similar burn marks were discovered in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator had used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA evidence. A forensic investigation into Vanessa's death revealed that she was killed by strangulation. Her struggles against her attacker resulted in the presence of an unknown person's DNA under her fingernails. The fact that her clothes were removed suggests a brief but clear motive. The medical examination found evidence of contact with a male. DNA testing did not produce a match in either local or national databases. The violent crime sent shockwaves through the small town of Princeton, with a population of under 4,000 people. The incident was highly unusual for the area, prompting widespread concern. Local authorities urged residents of Princeton and surrounding areas to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. In a press conference on August 11th, Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed that the suspect is likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle with Vanessa. The news of Vanessa Marcotte's death sent shockwaves through her family, the Princeton community, and her co-workers. A Google spokesperson expressed the company's condolences, describing Marcotte as a beloved team member who worked in the New York office for a year and a half. She was known for her bright smile, dedication to volunteer work, and enthusiasm for Boston sports. Google is deeply saddened by her loss and is thinking of her family and friends. Boston University, Vanessa Marcotte's alma mater, also paid tribute to her. The university's executive director of media relations, Colin Riley, said, "We are heartbroken for her family and friends. They are in our thoughts and prayers." Initially, police investigated a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and the murder of another runner, Karina Vetrano, which occurred a few days earlier in New York City. On August 2, 2016, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens, despite her father's concerns about her running alone. She was last seen alive around 5 p.m., just before entering the park. When she failed to respond to calls and texts, her father alerted the police, who began searching for her around 11 p.m. Tragically, her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. Karina Vetrano's murder shared similarities with Vanessa Marcotte's case, including the fact that her body was found exposed and she had been strangled. However, investigators initially did not believe the cases were connected. 6 months after Vetrano's murder, 20-year-old Chanel Lewis was arrested and later sentenced to life in prison without parole after his DNA was matched to evidence found on Vetrano's body. In contrast, the investigation into Vanessa Marcotte's murder remained ongoing. Detectives believed that Vanessa Marcotte killer likely lived in or frequently visited Princeton and was familiar with the area. They also thought that Vanessa Marcotte did not know her killer and that their encounter was accidental. To aid in the investigation, law enforcement set up separate 24-hour phone lines for the public to report any information. A key eyewitness came forward, reporting that they saw Vanessa stop at a local convenience store for a drink of water around 1 p.m. on August 7th. She was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. The attack on Vanessa is believed to have occurred within 2 hours of her being seen outside the store. Her phone was last active at 2:11 p.m. and has remained off since. Despite an extensive search of the area where her body was found in the surrounding neighborhood, police initially found few leads. It wasn't until 3 months later that a new witness came forward with crucial information. The witness reported seeing a dark-colored Ford SUV parked near the crime scene on August 7th on 2 separate occasions. The first sighting was at 12:45 p.m. when the witness saw the driver, a Hispanic man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second sighting was at 2:05 p.m. when the witness drove by the same location and saw the SUV still parked, but with its hood down and no one in sight. This new information led authorities to launch a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and may live in the Princeton area. On February 23, 2017, 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released new details about the investigation. DNA found on Vanessa's body had been analyzed, and a suspect profile was created based on the DNA and witness statements. The suspect was described as a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He was believed to have had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and to have suffered visible upper body injuries shortly after the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer in Worcester County spotted a man who matched the suspect's description. The man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen on the day of Vanessa's death. The officer quickly noted the license plate number and identified the car's owner. The police then visited the owner's residence, where they found 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colin Ortiz was a 30-year-old husband and father of 3 who had recently moved to Worcester, Massachusetts, from Puerto Rico. He worked as a delivery driver for a FedEx contractor and was familiar with the Princeton area, where he often made deliveries. Despite his clean record, Colin's behavior was concerning to those around him. Neighbors in Worcester described him as having a perverse nature and often making vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former Princeton postal worker also reported that Colin frequently made crude comments about her and other women to his co-workers. When questioned by police about the attack on Vanessa Marcotte, Colin claimed he did not know her and couldn't remember if he was in Princeton on the day of the incident. However, He did agree to provide a DNA sample, signing documents to allow his DNA to be analyzed. The lab took some time to process the DNA test, which ultimately revealed a match between Colin Ortiz's DNA and the DNA found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails on April 15, 2017. As a result, Colin was arrested and charged with the crime just 3 days later. Prosecutors presented evidence that on the day of the murder, Colin purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store located 6 miles from the crime scene at 2:35 p.m. This suggested that Colin had returned to the scene after Vanessa's death in an attempt to destroy evidence, including his DNA on her body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was collected through proper procedures, which led to the charges against Colin. However, Colin's attorneys countered that their client's DNA sample was obtained irregularly, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the evidence. The defense team argued that Colin Ortiz's language barrier hindered his ability to understand that providing a DNA sample to the police was optional. In fact, Ortiz stated that he was unaware that he could refuse to provide one. Colin, a U.S. citizen born in Puerto Rico, does not speak, read, or understand English, as he declared in an affidavit. He recounted that on March 16, 2017, 2 white state police officers visited his home with a translator who spoke a Spanish dialect that was unfamiliar to him. The trial extended for several years, ultimately leading to Judge Janet Kenton Walker's decision on January 11, 2022, to deny the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin maintained his innocence to the original charge of first-degree murder, but through a plea agreement, he pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carries a shorter sentence. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, pleaded guilty to the robbery charge and was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. As part of the plea bargain, Colin will serve 20 years for the robbery charge, followed by a life sentence with a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. This means he will spend at least 45 years in prison before he can be considered for parole. The Vanessa Marcotte family agreed to the plea bargain to avoid a lengthy and emotionally challenging trial. In a statement, they expressed relief that the trial ended in a way that ensures Colin will no longer be able to harm anyone. Vanessa Marcotte's father stated that he is pleased that the monster will be kept off the streets and that he will not live to see Colin's parole hearing. Colin's sentence brings closure to the Vanessa Marcotte family, who can now find some comfort in knowing that justice has been served and that Colin will be held accountable for his actions. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal. Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal was born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid, to parents Diana Cristina Lopez Pinal and Juan Carlo Cayer. She has a younger sister named Valeria. Her family was wealthy and everyone in the family was very close-knit. But their lives hit a snag in 2013 when Diana's parents divorced. However, the father still visits his daughter regularly on holidays. In the summer of 2016, Diana, her mother, and her younger sister spent their vacation in the small coastal town of Apab du Carmel, a place they had visited many times before. The town, with a population of around 10,000, is a quiet and picturesque retreat away from the hustle and bustle of city life. On the evening of August 21st, Diana told her mother that she was going to meet her friends at Val Inclin Park to celebrate the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. The park was close to their vacation cottage, and Diana often walked there. Her mother gave her permission to go. Diana spent a fun evening with her friends, she unaware that it would be the last time they would see each other. At around 2:30 a.m., she said goodbye to her friends and began her home. On the way, she ran into a friend, Paso de Ariel, near her favorite pizzeria. He was the last person to see Diana that night. The next morning, August 22, 2016, became a nightmare for Diana's mother, Christina. When she realized her daughter hadn't come home from the party, she grew concerned. Diana's phone was off, which only added to her worry. Without hesitation, Christina contacted the police and reported her daughter missing. According to Christina, Diana didn't have any serious emotional or mental health issues, despite her parents' divorce when she was younger. Police opened an investigation into Diana's disappearance, looking into the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Diana's disappearance is a mystery that investigators must unravel. Their first clue came from the last message she sent to a friend in Madrid via WhatsApp. In these messages, Diana mentioned a stranger who was stalking her and shouting strange phrases, causing her to feel scared. Unfortunately, these were her last messages, after which she stopped replying to her friends' messages. During their search, they found a black hair band along the road that resembled the one Diana was wearing that night. Although this was the only evidence found at the scene of her disappearance, it gave investigators a clue to work with. Diana's friends had no information about her disappearance. Additionally, there were no CCTV cameras in the area where she was last seen. The street was dimly lit and deserted, with only a few garages and an old nightclub. Although some people reported seeing Diana get out of a car with 3 men and then get into another car, but these were not corroborated. The investigation into Diana's disappearance considered 2 primary theories. One possibility was that she was kidnapped by someone she knew. The other theory is that she was the victim of a random attack by a mentally unstable individual. Diana's mother proposed a third theory, speculating that her daughter might have been taken away by boat. New information emerged when Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend revealed that she had met a man from Morocco and purchased hashish with him. However, this detail only added to the complexity of the case. The media reported that the clothes Diana wore on the evening of her disappearance had been found, but her mother disputed it, saying it was not true. Several factors suggest that Diana did not leave voluntarily. Her credit cards and identification were still in the house. It suggests Diana's disappearance was forced, but the case remains unsolved and remains a mystery. After Diana vanished, the media reported on a fight between Diana and her mother that had occurred just days before. The press claimed that Diana had a nervous breakdown and needed medical attention. Her sister Valeria was also hospitalized with similar symptoms. To avoid conflict, the court awarded custody of Valeria to her father. The decision was made as a precaution due to the stress of Diana's disappearance. The father and Valeria left town, sparking rumors that the family was hiding something. Diana's friends revealed that running away from home was not unusual for her sisters, especially 16 years old, Valeria. The family dynamics were complex, and arguments between the mother and daughters were common. This information raises a question: if Diana regularly left the house without any problems, why was her mother so worried this time? On August 31st, Diana's parents failed to appear for a press conference, where they were expected to provide an update on the investigation into their daughter's disappearance. According to the family's lawyer, her parents were too distraught to attend, as they were struggling to accept the possibility of never seeing Diana again. An article published in El Mundo on September 11th revealed new information about the family's situation. Contrary to the mother's claims that Diana did not have mental health issues. It was reported that Diana had previously gone missing for 3 days in April. During this time, she had turned off her phone and told her mother that she no longer wanted to live with her. The mother had not contacted the police, which raised concerns about her response to her daughter's behavior. Letters exchanged between Diana and her younger sister Valeria were also made public, shedding light on the emotional struggles both girls were facing. Valeria had been hospitalized multiple times in the past year, including one instance where she had to have her stomach pumped due to an overdose of prescription medication. Prosecutors have launched a new investigation into the alleged abuse of Valeria, the youngest daughter of the family, due to the lack of progress in the case of Diana's disappearance. The investigation into Diana's disappearance is currently in progress and is moving forward quickly. Forensic experts have analyzed several items belonging to Diana, including her toothbrush, comb, computer, diary, and prescription medication. Investigators have also questioned her acquaintances, including a young Moroccan man she had a brief relationship with. Unfortunately, these efforts yielded no results and police searches remained unsuccessful. The police have conducted extensive searches in the surrounding mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes. However, it appears that Diana disappeared at around 3 a.m., and the last signal from her phone was detected in the Tarragon area, 13 miles from her family's location. 72 days after her disappearance, Diana's case remains unresolved. However, police have found a hairband and a cell phone matching the description of Diana's phone. Her father has confirmed that the phone belongs to his daughter. 2 months after Diana went missing, her Facebook profile suddenly became active again. Her friends and family quickly informed the police and provided screenshots. It appeared that the "Remind Password" feature had been used, allowing someone to access her account without knowing her login details. This led to 2 possible explanations: either Diana had forgotten her password and was trying to regain access, or someone else was attempting to break into her account. Diana's phone was a key element in the case, but it did not provide any useful information that could help explain her disappearance. The investigation finally made progress on November 10, 2006, when the driver of the car in which Diana was last seen was identified. The driver had a history of being involved in human trafficking, but this information was kept confidential to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. Initially, he had an alibi for the night of Diana's disappearance, as his wife claimed he was with her, which temporarily cleared him as a suspect. On December 25, 2017, a new piece of information came to light that greatly helped the investigation. A girl was attacked by a man who demanded her phone and threatened her with a weapon. She screamed, and a passing couple intervened, saving her from the assailant who attempted to drag her into his car. The traumatized girl quickly contacted the police, providing a description of the attacker and his vehicle's license plate number. The next day, the police arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abuengay, who had a previous criminal record. Significantly, Jose Enrique was the same individual who had been detained in 2016 on suspicion of kidnapping Diana but was released due to an alibi provided by his wife. Police re-questioned Jose Enrique and his wife. Following the interrogation, the wife admitted that her initial alibi had been false, and in reality, Jose Enrique was away from their home on the night Diana disappeared and did not return until 4 a.m. Jose Enrique initially claimed that he had accidentally hit Diana with his car and, fearing discovery and imprisonment, he had dumped her body. However, he later changed his story, confessing to kidnapping and murdering her. According to Jose Enrique's new testimony, he went to the beach to look for gasoline from abandoned cars, and that's where he met Diana. The confession of Jose Enrique reveals shocking and disturbing information. He kidnapped Diana, attempted to force her into a sexual act, and ultimately strangled her. This shocking confession sheds light on the case, confirming that Diana's disappearance was a heinous crime. The disappearance of Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal has been a traumatic and lengthy case for her family and those following her case. The investigation lasted 494 days and was heavily covered by the media, with many unfounded and damaging rumors about her parents, causing them great distress and making the investigation more difficult. Despite these challenges, investigators persisted and eventually gathered enough evidence to identify the perpetrator. Diana's loved ones remember her as a beautiful, energetic young woman whose short life was unfortunately ended after an encounter with a violent man. Although Jose Enrique initially withheld information about Diana's whereabouts, he eventually revealed the location of her body, allowing her family and friends to hold a proper burial in January 2018. Her body was discovered in the well of an abandoned warehouse. The perpetrator, Jose Enrique, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Angie Hausman. Angie Hausman was born on February 18, 1984, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father had left the family before her birth, and as a result, she never had the opportunity to know him. When Angie was 1 year old, her mother married a man named Ronald, and they had a son together. Angie got along well with her stepfather and was very close to her younger brother. Angie was a friendly and outgoing child who easily made friends with those around her. She lived with her family in a quiet suburban area of St. Louis. In 1993, at the age of 9, Angie attended the 4th grade at a local elementary school, which was just over a mile from her home. To get to school, she would take the bus from a nearby stop, and her parents felt relatively safe allowing her to travel alone due to the stop's proximity to their house. Angie usually walked to the bus stop with other neighborhood children, and after school, they would be watched over by several parents who would keep an eye on them from their windows as they made their way home. A tradition established in the neighborhood was that locals would watch over children and make sure they got home safely from the bus stop. On November 18th, Angie followed her usual routine and attended school, finishing at 3 p.m. She boarded the school bus with some neighborhood kids and got off at her stop. The other kids lived closer to the stop, so they walked ahead, leaving Angie to walk the remaining short distance home alone. However, Angie failed to arrive home, which was unusual. Her parents started to worry about half an hour later. They decided to walk along Angie's usual route from their house to the bus stop to see if they could find her. During their search, they spoke with other kids from Angie's school. They confirmed that she had gotten off the bus with them and was walking toward her home. Her parents also talked to neighbors who usually kept an eye on the kids but were busy that day and didn't see anything. Angie's parents and their friends combed the area but couldn't find her. As night began to fall, Angie's parents decided to call the police for assistance. Police officers quickly joined the search for Angie. The cold weather made it unlikely that she would have wandered off on her own, so they initially focused on the possibility of something more serious happening to her. A recent kidnapping in the neighborhood, involving an 11-year-old girl just 10 days earlier, further heightened their concerns. The man had approached the girl as she got off the school bus and tried to drag her into the bushes, but she managed to escape. Since the man was still at large, the police considered the possibility that he might be involved in Angie's disappearance. The police brought in dogs trained to track scents, and the dogs picked up Angie's scent near the bus stop. The dogs followed the scent for about half the distance to Angie's house, but then lost it. This suggested that Angie might have gotten into a vehicle at that point, which made the police think that she might have been abducted. The police also used helicopters with special sensors to search the area and looked along the banks of a small stream near Angie's home, but they did not find Angie or any of her belongings. The first day of the search for Angie yielded no results, prompting the police to reach out to the media for assistance. As a result, news of her disappearance spread rapidly throughout the city, generating over 300 calls to the police department within 24 hours. More than 20 additional officers were brought in to help handle the large number of new leads in the case. Despite this effort, none of the leads led to Angie's discovery. Detectives explored every possible scenario, and from the early stages of the investigation, they began to scrutinize Angie's stepfather. He denied any involvement in her disappearance and claimed he would never harm her. To clear his name, he agreed to a polygraph test and other checks, urging the police to focus on finding Angie rather than wasting time on him. The investigation also led to the discovery of Angie's biological father, who had never had any direct contact with his daughter. However, Her mother reported that he had been seen driving past their house on multiple occasions, watching Angie play outside. Although this behavior raised suspicions among detectives, the man had a solid alibi that checked out. On the third day of Angie's disappearance, the FBI stepped in to assist the police department, which then allocated even more officers to the case. Everyone realized that something awful must have occurred to Angie, as it was unlikely she could have survived on her own in the freezing weather. A new lead emerged. Someone reported a suspicious man driving a blue sedan slowly through Angie's neighborhood. The description of this man matched the one given by a girl who had narrowly escaped an abduction attempt just 10 days before Angie vanished. The police created a composite sketch of the suspect and featured it in the news. Volunteers distributed thousands of flyers with the sketch. But the man's identity remained a mystery. As the case gained national attention, it was covered on television, attracting even more leads. The police carefully examined each new lead, but none of them led to Angie's discovery. The case also drew in psychics. They began calling Angie's home to share their alleged visions. One psychic claimed that Angie was alive and even provided a specific location where she being held, a large national park 25 miles from her home. However, the detectives did not give any credence to these claims. A reward of $10,000 was offered to anyone who could provide information about Angie's disappearance, which led to a large number of tips being submitted. During the investigation, detectives discovered a concerning detail. Angie had told her teacher a few days before she vanished that she planned to go on a nature trip with her uncle. However, Angie's parents were unaware of any uncle, and it seemed Angie had fabricated this story. This led investigators to consider the possibility that Angie might have known her abductor beforehand and referred to them as her uncle. Unfortunately, the conversation with her teacher did not provide any information about this mysterious individual. The investigation stalled, with no progress made in the following days. On November 27th, 9 days after Angie's disappearance, an important development in the case was found. A hunter contacted the police, reported that he found a body in the woods of a national park. Upon arriving at the scene, police were met with a disturbing sight. A young girl's body was tied to a tree, naked, with her head completely wrapped in tape except for her nose. Her hands were also bound with handcuffs. Near where the body was found, they found a bag containing personal items, which were quickly identified as Angie's remains. Among the belongings were notebooks with her name. After being transferred to the medical examiner, a detailed examination of the body revealed additional shocking facts. The removal of tape from her head uncovered a piece of underwear lodged in her mouth. The autopsy results indicated that Angie's death had occurred only a few hours before the body was discovered. This suggested she was held captive for 9 days, only to be left to freeze to death at the scene. Experts further determined that Angie suffered numerous injuries and had been sexually assaulted during her ordeal. Forensic analysts carefully inspected every proof collected from the crime scene and identified a fingerprint on the tape used to wrap Angie's head. They cross-referenced this evidence against potential suspects in their database, but unfortunately, this led to no new leads. The discovery of the body accelerated the police investigation, prompting the allocation of additional resources to help solve the case. The community was shocked by the extreme brutality of the crime and was deeply concerned for their children's safety, with many escorting their kids to bus stops and keeping a close watch over them at all times. A few days after Angie's discovery, concerns escalated further. On December 1st, 10-year-old Cassidy went missing from a nearby town, just 10 miles from Angie's home. Cassidy asked her mother for permission to visit friends who lived just a few hundred yards away, but then she disappeared. Cassidy's disappearance sparked an extensive police investigation, and detectives began to suspect the possibility that Cassidy's case might be linked to a serial killer. Although they considered the possibility that the same person was behind both abductions, they lacked concrete evidence to support this theory. 10 days later, Cassidy's body was found in St. Louis, wrapped in bed sheets and covered with a pink curtain. The cause of death was severe head injuries. Despite efforts, detectives couldn't find any leads to the killer. Furthermore, they started questioning whether the same person was responsible for both Angie's and Cassidy's deaths. Detectives suspected they might be dealing with two different killers due to the distinct characteristics of the crimes. Around the same time, they identified a 37-year-old man named Gary as a potential suspect. Gary had previously attempted to abduct a girl just before Angie went missing and regularly traveled to St. Louis for work. The man was initially investigated for potential involvement in the murders of Angie and Cassidy, but he had an alibi for the time of their disappearances. Although he was not connected to these crimes, he did admit to assaulting 4 other girls and was subsequently sentenced to 5 years in prison. In February of the following year, a significant development in the case was revealed when detectives finally found Cassidy's body. Nearby, they found tire tracks that were identified as coming from a pickup truck model frequently used by a prominent car rental company. The distinctive vehicles were easily recognizable due to their vibrant brand logos. With this new information, detectives interviewed residents in Cassidy's neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen one of these pickup trucks. One woman reported seeing a vehicle from the car rental company near her neighbor's house about a week after Cassidy's disappearance. Police found a woman who lived with her husband and brother at the house they were investigating. When questioned, the woman claimed neither she nor her husband, brother had rented the pickup associated with the crime, and they had no involvement in the case. However, detectives were skeptical of her claims and obtained a search warrant for the house. Upon searching the house, investigators found blood traces from the victim, Cassidy, in the basement, along with the murder weapon. Further investigation revealed that the woman's brother, Thomas, was the one who had rented the pickup in question. Initially, Thomas denied any involvement but eventually confessed when confronted with the evidence. According to Thomas's confession, Cassidy had come to his door, wanting to invite his nephews out to play. He invited her into the house and led her to the basement, where he attempted to assault her. When Cassidy screamed, Thomas struck her with a heavy object and then covered her body with bed sheets. After committing the crime, Thomas went to work as usual. Upon returning home, his sister told him that she had discovered the body in the basement. She made it clear that she didn't want to know the details of what happened and insisted that the body be disposed of immediately. Cassidy's body remained in the basement for a week due to ongoing searches, and Thomas was too afraid to move it. Once things had calmed down, he rented a pickup truck and took the body to St. Louis. He hid her body there. Thomas was eventually sentenced to death for his crimes but died in prison several years later due to illness. Despite being questioned about Angie's case, he maintained his innocence, leading detectives to conclude that the crimes were unrelated. The investigation stalled for many months with few leads coming in. Years after Angie's murder, detectives faced another challenge when the reward for information was set to expire, sparking concerns that the public would stop providing tips and assistance in the case. However, in 2001, a local businessman donated $250,000 as a reward for information on Angie's case. This large sum of money caused a spike in many information to the police. But unfortunately, there are no clues to help solve the case. In 2001, a new development emerged in the Angie Houseman case when Corey Fox, an inmate, turned himself in and confessed to multiple murders, including the murder of Angie Houseman. Corey Fox provided detailed information about Angie's abduction and captivity, including being tied to a tree with her underwear used as a gag. However, upon further questioning, detectives found inconsistencies in his confession, such as incorrectly stating that Angie's hands were restrained with plastic handcuffs instead of iron ones. Further investigation revealed that Corey Fox also fabricated parts of his confession, possibly due to extensive media coverage of Angie's case. Another tragic case happened in 2002. The abduction and murder of a 6-year-old girl briefly sparked renewed interest in Angie's case. However, it was soon determined that the two cases were unrelated. The perpetrator in the 2002 case was a neighbor. He quickly confessed during interrogation, while Angie's case remained unsolved. Several years after Angie's murder, detectives reopened the case in 2007. They re-examined the documents and found a peculiar detail. A man named Roger Martin was in a parked car near the crime scene when Angie's body was discovered. When questioned, Roger claimed he was in the area for hunting, but a search of his car found no hunting gear. Further investigation revealed that Roger had a criminal record involving children, including an assault near the location where Angie's body was found. These crimes occurred before Angie's death, but the police had not thoroughly investigated Roger at the time. The new detective team called Roger in for questioning. He denied any involvement in Angie's murder, claiming he was in the area by chance. Roger stated that he was still at work when Angie's body was left at the crime scene. The investigation stalled after a 9-hour interrogation of Roger failed to yield results. Although his fingerprints were taken and compared to those on the tape from Angie's head, no match was found, leading to his release due to insufficient evidence. The case remained stagnant until 2018 when the St. Louis Police Department established a dedicated task force to re-examine the evidence using advanced technology. The team focused on 3 crucial pieces of evidence: the handcuffs, the tape from Angie's head, and the underwear used to silence her. Despite previous failed attempts to find the perpetrator's DNA on these items, the detectives were determined to try again. They began by re-examining the handcuffs but encountered difficulties due to the presence of Angie's blood. They then turned their attention to the tape from Angie's head but discovered it had deteriorated over time, meaningless their efforts. The investigators examined the underwear as a last resort, despite low expectations due to it being in Angie's mouth for several hours, which could have erased any foreign DNA. Using advanced technology, they thoroughly inspected every inch of the underwear and eventually found a tiny sample of unfamiliar DNA, sufficient for analysis. The DNA was confirmed to belong to a male and was immediately uploaded to the FBI database. In cases like this, it's common for the DNA not to match anyone in the database, requiring further efforts to identify the person. However, in this instance, the detectives got lucky. As soon as the DNA sample was uploaded, they received a match. The DNA belonged to 58-year-old Earl Cox, who had been in prison since 2003. Cox was not on police radar in connection with Angie's case, but he had a significant criminal record. His first stint in prison was in 1982, during his military service in Germany, where he worked as a part-time babysitter. However, his babysitting job ended when 4 girls accused him of sexual assault. Cox initially received an 8-year prison sentence in the United States but was released after serving only 3 years. Following his release, he relocated to St. Louis. However, his freedom was short-lived as he was arrested again 4 years later when 2 7-year-old girls accused him of sexual assault. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, but he violated his parole, resulting in an additional year in prison. After his release in 1992, Cox moved to St. Louis to live with his relatives. The following year, he allegedly abducted and murdered Angie. In 2002, Cox was arrested again, this time for operating a major online platform where users shared child abuse materials. The FBI had been investigating the platform and caught Cox in a sting operation when he attempted to meet an undercover agent posing as a 14-year-old girl. Cox had planned to make the girl his slave and had sent her money for a bus ticket. However, when he arrived at the meeting place, he was met by armed FBI agents and arrested. A search of his computer revealed over 45,000 images of child abuse, as well as evidence that he was the mastermind behind the online platform. This led to the arrest of 60 more individuals associated with the site, marking one of the largest operations against pedophiles in the country. In 2003, Cox was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, when his term ended, a judge used a legal loophole to keep him detained, citing him as a serious threat to children. He remained in prison until 2019, when his DNA sample matched the DNA sample from Angie's case. Detectives visited Cox in prison to discuss the match, but he denied any involvement and requested a lawyer. Given the strong DNA evidence against him, the police knew Cox's chances of winning in court were slim. Instead of pursuing a trial, investigators contacted Earl's lawyer with a proposal. In exchange for Cox's confession to Angie's murder, the prosecution would drop the death penalty and seek a life sentence instead. Aware of the strong evidence against him, Cox agreed to the deal. Detectives returned to the prison to hear Cox's account of the events. Although some parts of his story seemed unlikely, the crucial aspect for investigators was his admission to the murder. Cox claimed that on November 18, 1993, he was driving near his mother's and sister's neighborhood when his car broke down in the middle of the road. When he tried to examine the car, a school bus stopped, and several children got off. The children went into their homes, except for one girl, Angie. According to Cox, Angie approached him, and they briefly talked. He noticed she was cold, so he offered her a ride in his car, which she allegedly accepted. Cox then took Angie to Burger King to eat and later brought her to his home, where he claimed to have sexually assaulted her over several days. Eventually, Cox decided to get rid of Angie, taking her to the location where her body would later be found. He tied her to a tree, claiming she was still alive at that moment. Detectives were skeptical about certain parts of Cox's story. Angie was unlikely to get into a car with a stranger, given the short distance to her home. The investigators also questioned the car breakdown in Cox's story. He claimed the car stalled, but it started again when Angie approached. It's more likely that the perpetrator targeted Angie and decided to abduct her. This hypothesis seems more plausible than Cox's account. The detectives got what they needed, a confession to the murder. In August 2020, Cox was sentenced to life in prison without parole. A judge handed down the sentence. Unfortunately, Angie's mother didn't live to see justice served. She died of cancer in 2016. Angie's father, Ronald, told reporters that Cox was responsible for his wife's death and should have been tried for 2 murders. A woman's life was forever changed after the loss of her daughter. She lost all interest in life and eventually passed away. Cox's story, however, took a different turn. The prosecutor reopened a case involving the sexual abuse of 2 7-year-old girls, for which Cox had previously received a lenient sentence of 1 year in prison for violating his parole. The police reached out to one of Cox's victims, now an adult, and asked her to testify against him. Cox ultimately admitted to his crimes and was given an additional 10 years prison sentence. In court, his victim spoke out, saying that despite Cox's terrible actions, but she would go on to live a happy and fulfilling life, while Cox would spend the rest of his life in prison. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jaden Parkinson. Jaden Parkinson, born on September 26, 1996 in Folkestone, United Kingdom, Jaden is the youngest of 3 children. Her parents had a strained relationship. Family problems led to her parents' divorce when Jaden was only 7 years old. Jaden lives with her father. Although Jaden lives with her father, the relationship with her mother Samantha Shuri remains strong. Jaden and her mother talk on the phone every night. As Jaden entered her teenage years, her life became increasingly unstable. Her father often ignored her. She began smoking and drinking, and spent time living with both parents. At the age of 13, Jayden ran away from her father's house and moved in with her mother, eventually winning a court order allowing her to stay there. Jayden was in a relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at the age of 14. Blakely had a profound influence on her, gradually changing her over time. Jayden was 15 when she started dating Ben, 20. The significant age gap worried Jayden's mother, but she couldn't stop her daughter from falling in love. Initially, their relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually deteriorated over time. And their relationship became increasingly strained. Ben controlled every aspect of Jayden's life. She stopped wearing makeup and became increasingly withdrawn. He dictated what clothes she wore and isolated her from family and friends. As a result, Jayden moved out of her mother's house and into a shelter for women who were victims of domestic violence. Although the shelter's rules forbade Ben from visiting, he continued to exert complete control over Jayden's life. Jayden and Ben frequently had arguments, and at one point, Jayden even warned the hostel staff about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Ben exerted significant control over Jayden, dictating her every move and restricting her freedom. He took away her mobile phone, convincing her that she didn't need anything else as long as she had him. Ben also prohibited her from interacting with men and monitored her social media activity. As a result, Jayden stopped attending school. Jayden's communication with her mother, which was once a daily occurrence, dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Her mother, Samantha, urged Jayden to return home and end the relationship with Ben, but Jayden refused. Ben's control over Jayden was both psychological and physical, and where Jayden was seen with visible bruises on her face. On November 30, 2013, Jayden announced to her mother that she was pregnant. Hoping to change Ben, she believed that the baby would bring positive changes to their relationship and his lifestyle. Jayden envisioned the baby would bring them closer together, and that Ben would return to the caring person she first met. Unfortunately, Ben has not changed. Once Ben gained complete control over Jayden, his true nature emerged. He isolated her from friends and family, leaving her financially dependent on him. The situation escalated to the point where Jayden was confined to her room, even restricted from using the bathroom without permission. Unbeknownst to Jayden, Ben was secretly dating other women, exerting the same manipulative control over them. Samantha learned about her daughter Jayden's pregnancy and asked her to come home, but Jayden declined, not wanting to cause her mother more trouble. When Jayden told her Ben about the pregnancy, he became enraged and denied being the father. He even threatened to post intimate photos and videos of Jayden on social media. Fearing Ben would follow through on his threat, Jayden reported him to the police a few days before she went missing. Ben had around 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jayden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jayden failed to return to her hostel for the night. Knowing about the problems in Jayden's life, the police tried to find her, but were unsuccessful. They contacted Jayden's mother Samantha by phone, but she did not know where Jayden was. On December 4, 2013, police received a report that Jayden was missing. Police contacted Jayden's boyfriend, Ben, to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, Ben was uncooperative and hung up several times, claiming that he did not know where Jayden was, Jayden having run away from home several times before, so her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate concerns. The next day, Ben was arrested and taken to the police station, but not in connection with Jayden's disappearance. The arrest was due to a report that Jayden had filed a few days earlier, stating that she feared Ben would post private photos of her online. The police questioned Ben. Ben denied any intention to post the photos and was released on bail the same day. Samantha distributed flyers with Jayden's picture. In addition to distributing flyers, she also used social media platforms to publicize Jayden's disappearance, hoping to get clues for the case. The police analyzed security footage. They collected surveillance camera footage from the motel where Jayden lived. The footage showed the girl going out to meet Ben but, then, did not return to her residence. On December 3rd, Jayden was seen again at Oxford railway station. Surveillance footage captured her walking inside with Ben, and nothing unusual occurred in the video. After tracking their movements, police discovered that Ben and Jayden had taken the train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. Jayden's last known location was the railway station in Didcot, where the footage showed her and Ben leaving the building. In the past, whenever Jayden ran away, she would usually contact her family within a day or two to let them know she was safe. This time, however, was different. Jayden had not contacted her family or friends, and there was no activity on her social media accounts. After reviewing surveillance camera footage showing Jayden boarding the train with Ben, he became the prime suspect in her disappearance. Police were certain that Ben knew where Jayden was and what had happened to her. The footage revealed that Ben returned to the train station alone, and there was no further sighting of Jayden. 1 week later, on December 10, 2013, Ben Blakely was arrested by the police. Police wanted to question Ben to find out what happened to Jayden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At that point, the police had not ruled out the possibility that Jayden might be hiding of her own free will or that Ben might be holding her. During the interrogation, Ben displayed confidence. He claimed to have no knowledge of Jayden's whereabouts. According to Ben, he and Jayden had broken up, and she was now in a relationship with someone else. Ben suggested that the police should focus on speaking with Jayden's new boyfriend, as he believed this person might have more information about her disappearance. Ben appeared indifferent to Jayden's situation, saying that the fact that they had broken up and Ben had a new girlfriend made her situation irrelevant to him. He suggested that the police check Jayden's social media accounts to gather information about her recent activities and interactions. Ben Blakely was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder, despite Jayden still being missing. The police interviewed Jayden's friends to see if she might have gone to a safe location, but they found out that Jayden had distanced herself from her friends after she started dating Ben. As a result, no one knew if she had a place to hide. During the search for Jayden, a taxi driver from Didcot provided vital information to the police. On December 4th, at around 1 a.m., the taxi driver picked up a passenger on a dirt road. The passenger, a young man with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud, needed help lifting the suitcase into the taxi. The taxi driver became suspicious and wondered if he had accidentally witnessed a crime. The investigation revealed that the person who called the taxi was Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When questioned further, Ben refused to answer any further questions. Analysis of his phone location records showed that Ben had visited a number of locations in Didcot, including a disused rural shed where a taxi had picked him up that night. A team of police officers and sniffer dogs searched the shed as part of the investigation. It was also discovered that Ben and Jayden had visited the shed earlier. Police found a bracelet matching Jayden's near the scene. Trained sniffer dogs indicated the presence of a body inside the shed, but Jayden's body was not found. This led police to suspect a large suitcase was involved when Ben got into the taxi. Police have appealed to the public for assistance, asking anyone who saw a man carrying a large suitcase in rural Didcot to come forward. Meanwhile, officers have conducted interviews at nearby homes to gather more information. Footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jayden were not carrying suitcases, which led police to wonder where Ben got the suitcases. It is also possible that the man described by the taxi driver was not Ben. On December 14th, police discovered that Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned warehouse. When police visited Ben's grandmother, she later explained that Ben had taken a suitcase from her a few days earlier. He had arrived in a hurry, dumped the contents of the suitcase on the floor and left without explanation. Ben's grandmother said he returned home 2 days after Jayden went missing and threw his mountain bike into the shed. However, the bike was dirty when he returned. She also reported that 2 shovels were missing, only to reappear later, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the 2 shovels raised questions about Ben's intentions and the potential involvement of an accomplice. Notably, Ben and his younger brother Jake Blakely, 17, were also acquaintances of Jayden. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding mountain bikes together. As the investigation began, police found sufficient cause to suspect Jake of being involved in the crime and subsequently arrested him. The suitcase that Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn was sent to a laboratory for analysis to determine if it contained Jayden's DNA. Based on the available evidence, police developed a theory that Jayden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in the suitcase and moved to another location for burial. However, searching for Jayden's body in the vast field surrounding Didcot seemed challenging. To help narrow down the search area, the police used aviation to aid in the investigation and estimate the likely location of Jayden's burial site. Through aerial photography, police identified 10 locations with significant recent changes in soil surface. The police initially examined several sites but found no leads on Jayden's body. Before they could inspect all 10 locations, a new lead emerged when Jake Blakely began cooperating with police. He directed them to check his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near All Saints Church. This cemetery was one of the original 10 locations, although it was considered a low priority due to the common occurrence of soil changes in cemeteries. Police secured the cemetery after receiving information from Jake Blakely, who suggested that Jayden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave. This method of concealment had never been seen by police before. Jake and Ben's uncle reportedly died in 2006. The new developments in the case have attracted widespread media attention, as this is the first case in the country where a victim's body was concealed in an existing grave. A tent was set up in the cemetery to facilitate a forensic examination. Following this setup, Jayden's family received devastating news. Her body had been found in the grave of Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle. The body was found without clothes, and no jewelry was present. Forensic experts discovered evidence that Jayden had been severely beaten before her death. Specifically, her neck showed signs of strangulation, which was confirmed as the cause of death by the pathologist, with asphyxia being the official cause. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely changed his defense strategy, and he and his attorney drafted a confession letter stating that Ben was indeed responsible for Jayden's death. However, he maintained that the act was not intentional. According to his testimony, a heated argument led him to push Jayden, causing her to fall from a bridge near an abandoned warehouse. Ben tried to revive Jayden but was unsuccessful. He initially buried her in another location. He then moved the body to the cemetery, where it was buried in his uncle's grave. However, the autopsy results contradicted his story. There was no evidence that she had fallen, but instead, her face showed signs of blunt force trauma. The official cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, suggesting that Ben's story was not true. Ben Blakely was trying to reduce his guilt in Jayden's death. Jayden's father passed away due to heart problems before the trial started. On June 23, 2014, Ben Blakely was in court, and it became clear that he showed no regret for his actions. His behavior was provocative and aggressive, revealing his indifference to taking the life of Jayden and her unborn child. During the 4-week trial, it was revealed that Ben Blakely from Reading, Berks, had a history of being a violent and controlling partner. 3 of his previous girlfriends testified against him, sharing their experiences of being in abusive relationships with him. They reported that he would confiscate their phones, physical assault them, and even grab them by the throat if they responded back or if he suspected them of cheating. Throughout the trial, Ben received multiple warnings from the judge for using profanity in the dock and on the witness stand, where he repeatedly shouted at the prosecutor, Richard Leem. His outbursts were so intense that Jaden's mother and other family members were forced to leave the courtroom in tears on multiple occasions. The judge, Patrick Eccles, was also pushed to his limits. He ordered Ben Blakely to be taken to the cells to continue the trial without him. Jake Blakely, who was under 18 at the time, said he had no idea what was inside the suitcase and thought he was burying weapons or dead animals. He was persuaded by his brother, Ben, who promised him an Xbox console and $100 in exchange for carrying out the mission. The prosecutor alleged that the crime was premeditated, suggesting that Ben Blakely intentionally took Jaden to a secluded location where he could commit the crime without being seen. It is believed that Blakely's actions were driven by a desire to control Jaden's life, which was disrupted by her pregnancy and her desire to start anew. Ben Blakely, who did not want to become a father. Jaden's mother, Samantha Shrewsbury, has spoken out in support of creating a domestic violence registry. In an interview with Sky News, she expressed her desire to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. She recalled the traumatic experience of identifying her daughter's body and stated that the memory would haunt her forever. In the year leading up to Jaden's death, Samantha believed that Jaden was the target of Ben's abuse. Samantha remembers an incident where Ben came to Samantha's apartment building the day after he verbally and physically abused Jaden. He managed to enter the building and banged on the door, demanding to see Jaden. Samantha refused to let him in, and in response, he spat on Samantha before leaving. That same day, Jaden went outside to smoke, and unfortunately, Ben found her. Samantha did not see or hear from Jaden for the next 2 weeks. During that time, Samantha assumed that Jaden had gone to Ben's house. As a result, it became difficult to contact Jaden because Ben had destroyed her phone or SIM card. Despite his horrific behavior, which included burning, beating, and starving Jaden, Ben remained in denial about his true nature. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before returning their verdict. Ben Blakely was found guilty of willfully murdering Jaden Parkinson. The judge told Ben Blakely that he took 17-year-old Jaden Parkinson to a remote area near Upton, where he strangled her to death. The judge also noted that Ben's behavior towards Jaden was marked by irrational jealousy, physical abuse, and emotional manipulation throughout their relationship. The judge found that Ben Blakely had taken control of Jaden's daily life. To isolate her, he took away her phone and restricted her movements while she was in the boarding house, even to the point of not allowing her to use the toilet, forcing her to urinate in plastic bottles. Despite Ben's abusive behavior, Jaden fought to leave him. Jaden finally found the courage to end their relationship last November. Ben threatened to share intimate photos of the two of them publicly. The court sentenced Ben Blakely, who was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Ben's younger brother, Jake Blakely, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pam Hupp. Pam Hupp was born on October 20th, 1958, in Delwood, Missouri, as the second child of the Newman family. She married Mark Hupp and they had 2 children together. In 2001, the family moved to Fallon, Missouri. Pam had a varied work history, including a job as a life administrator at State Farm until 2010, when she stopped working due to disability claims related to leg and back pain. Despite some past legal issues, including 2 charges of forgery, Pam's acquaintances would never have suspected her of being capable of murder. However, on August 16, 2016, Pam shot and killed Louis Gumpenberger, a mentally challenged man who had been struggling with physical and mental disabilities since a 2005 car accident. Pam claimed that Louis had attacked her with a knife after jumping out of a passing vehicle, and that she had defended herself by slapping the knife away, and then shooting him 5 times with her Ruger LCR, which she retrieved from her nightstand. However, this account of events seems suspicious, and it is uncertain what really happened that day. Pam accused Louis of instructing her to drive him to the bank to withdraw money belonging to Russ Farrier, a man wrongly convicted of murdering his wife Betsy in 2011. According to Pam, Louis became agitated and excited, saying, "We're going to the bank. We're getting Russ's money." However, evidence later revealed that Louis's true intention was to have Louis Gumpenberger attack and kill Pam. A handwritten note found at the crime scene contained instructions for Gumpenberger. First, he was to obtain Russ's money from Pam's apartment. Next, he was to kill Pam and make it look like Russ's wife was responsible. The note included gruesome details, such as ensuring the knife was left sticking out of Pam's neck. The perpetrator was willing to pay Gumpenberger a large sum of money for carrying out this heinous act. Pam Hupp was arrested for the murder of Lou Gumpenberger. However, a question arose. Was Gumpenberger a hired assassin, or did Pam manipulate him, using a mentally disabled man as a scapegoat? The truth began to unravel when Pam went to the O'Fallon Police Department voluntarily. During her interview, Pam asked if it would be recorded, mentioning that she normally appeared with Chris Hayes, a KTVI news reporter. She even blamed Hayes for attracting criminals through his reporting. Pam had a history of pretending to be Kathy, a producer of an NBC TV show. According to the O'Fallon police chief and the St. Charles County prosecutor, Pam used this persona to lure Gumpenberger into her home, where she tricked him into recreating a 911 call, providing a cover for the brutal crime she was about to commit. After killing Gumpenberger, Pam Hupp planted evidence to incriminate herself, including writing a note found on his body. The police had a strong case against her due to the overwhelming evidence they uncovered. They found $9 bills on Gumpenberger's body, which Pam had placed there. The 10th $9 bill was later discovered in her dresser, and its serial number matched 3 of the $100 bills, also found on Gumpenberger. Pam Hupp was arrested on August 23, 2016, and charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. When she requested to use the restroom on the day of her arrest, she attempted to commit suicide by stabbing her wrist and neck with a ballpoint pen. Fortunately, she did not succeed. On January 30, 2017, Pam appeared in court for the first time. The prosecutor, Phil Groyne, argued that her actions demonstrated a consciousness of guilt. A grand jury convicted her of all charges. In December 2016, her bail was set at $2 million. Pam's trial began in 2017, during which she pleaded not guilty, prompting the prosecutor to pursue the death penalty. The prosecutor's reasoning was that Pam had seemingly chosen her victim, Gumpenberger, at random. In June 2019, Pam entered an Alford plea, which allowed her to plead guilty while maintaining her innocence. This move nullified the death penalty charge and led to a jury trial being cancelled. As a result, Pam was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in August 2019. Following her sentencing, she called her then-husband Matt Hupp and explained that she had confessed to killing Louis Gumpenberger to avoid putting their family through a lengthy and distressing trial. During the trial, disturbing facts about Pam's past came to light, shocking the police, judges, and the public. In June 2016, Judge Cunningham ruled that evidence related to the brutal murder of Betsy Farrier could be presented in court. This ruling led to the reopening of the Betsy Farrier case. Betsy, born Elizabeth Farrier, worked with Pam at State Farm as a life insurance administrator and lived in Troy, Missouri, with her husband Russ Farrier and 2 daughters from a previous relationship. Betsy was diagnosed with cancer in 2010. In October 2011, she discovered that the cancer had spread to her liver and she only had a few months left to live. Sadly, she passed away on December 22, 2011. Before her death, Betsy changed the beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy from her husband to Pam Huff, without informing her husband or daughters. Pam claimed that Betsy had instructed her to set up a trust fund for her daughters, but later alleged that Betsy wanted her to keep the money because they had a romantic relationship. Betsy's daughters took Pam to court in 2014, trying to reclaim their mother's life insurance fund. However, their case was dismissed in 2016. In the same year, Russ, Betsy's husband, sued State Farm. On December 27, 2011, just 5 days after making Pam the beneficiary of her life insurance policy, Betsy attended a chemotherapy session at the Alvin J. Sitman Cancer Center. Weakened from the treatment, she went to her mother's house, where it was agreed that Russ would pick her up, or she would stay overnight. However, Pam unexpectedly showed up and insisted on driving Betsy home, claiming to have dropped her off around 7 p.m. Betsy's daughter reported that her mother didn't answer her call at around 7:21 p.m. Later, at 9:40 p.m., Russ, Betsy's husband, desperately called 911 to report that his wife had taken her own life. However, Russ had been at his friend Michael Corbin's house watching movies from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Afterward, he drove to Arby's Lake in St. Louis before returning home. When the emergency responders arrived about 10 minutes after Russ's call, they quickly realized that Betsy's death was not a suicide. Her body was found lying on her right side, with 55 stab wounds and a deep cut on her wrist. A kitchen knife was lodged in her neck, and another knife was discovered under her pillow. Notably, there were no bloodstains or footprints around the entrance of the house. The investigation determined that Betsy died between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. Suspicion immediately fell on Russ Farrier, who became the prime suspect. The authorities believed he had a motive, as his wife had refused to give him access to $150,000. Russ was arrested and charged with his wife's murder, while the real killer remained at large. Russ Farrier was arrested the day after Betsy's death. He became the prime suspect due to his 911 call, in which he claimed her death was a suicide. However, a glance at the body immediately ruled out this possibility. Additionally, a pair of blood-stained slippers were discovered in his closet, incriminating evidence against him. Russ was subsequently charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action in court in January 2012, just a day after his wife's funeral. The investigation revealed more damning evidence against Russ. He performed poorly on a polygraph test, leading police to regard his behavior as suspicious and erratic. Furthermore, at Pam's request, the police searched Betsy's laptop and found a disturbing Word document in which she expressed her fear of losing her life at the hands of her husband. Russ was held on a $250,000 bail, which he couldn't afford, so he was kept in county jail until his trial on November 18, 2013. During police questioning, Pam revealed that Russ had a history of violence, heavy drinking, and had previously threatened Betsy, making it easy to suspect him of the murder. The prosecution argued that Russ had a strong motive to kill his wife. She had received a large sum of $150,000 for her friend, bypassing him in the process. According to Judge Christina Menem, this motive was enough to implicate Russ. At the trial, Russ's lawyer, Joel Schwartz, defended his client's innocence. Schwartz claimed that Russ had spent most of the night with friends who corroborated his alibi. Additionally, Russ had purchased food at a store that evening, which made it physically impossible for him to stab his wife 55 times within the given time frame. Furthermore, there were no bloodstains on his clothes or body. The prosecutor countered that Russ's friends might have been involved in the crime and had lied about his whereabouts that night. The prosecutor suggested that Russ's friends had accompanied him to buy food at ABY and stage an alibi. The presiding judge, Christina Menem, refused to allow Joel Schwartz to present crucial evidence that implicated Pam as an alternative suspect. This evidence included phone records showing Pam was still near Betsy's apartment 30 minutes after she claimed to have left, as well as the fact that Betsy had made Parry of a $150,000 life insurance policy just 5 days before her death. Despite Pam having a clear motive, the judge chose to ignore it. In a closed hearing, Pam claimed to have put $100,000 of the insurance money into a trust fund for Betsy's daughters. However, in a later civil deposition, she admitted to keeping the money for herself, stating that she didn't want her daughters, mother, or sisters to have it. Meanwhile, Detective Mike Merkel of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office reported that a crime scene camera had malfunctioned, resulting in important photographs being unable to be developed. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Russ was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action in November 2013. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 30 years. Before Ferrier's second trial, Attorney Schwartz finally obtained the photos that showed no blood trail. To this day, I've tried to identify who in the prosecutor's office sent me those photos, but I've been unsuccessful. Fox 2 News was present in the courtroom when Schwartz dramatically revealed that he had uncovered evidence that police and prosecutors had been hiding. After this, Russ was transferred to the Jefferson City Correctional Center, a welcome development for Pam's sister Betsy. During the trial, Russ's wife testified that he had once pressed a pillow against her face, whispering, "This is what it feels like to die," because she had removed him from her insurance policy. Schwartz pointed out that this story originally came from Pam, but the judge ignored this. Throughout the trial, Russ's friends were falsely accused of being accessories to murder, thanks to the prosecutor's closing speech. Fortunately, no charges were brought against them, even though Russ spent nearly 4 years in prison. In February 2015, attorney Joel Schwartz appealed Russ's conviction. However, back in 2013, Judge Christina Mem had already rejected Schwartz's request to review the case. In 2014, KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch revisited the case, uncovering some suspicious facts about Betsy's death and her true killer. Their investigation found that Pam Hupp had given contradictory statements to the police, including a false claim that she had left the Farrier residence immediately after dropping Betsy off. The Farrier murder case was marred by controversy and deceit. A police officer recalled being shocked that nobody suspected Pam, with everyone focusing on Russ instead. A 911 operator testified that Russ seemed genuinely shocked and agitated during their call. However, 2 jurors revealed that crucial information had been withheld from them, raising questions about why the sheriff's department would deliberately hide evidence that favored Russ. The media uncovered a disturbing web of relationships between the prosecuting attorney, ASI, and key figures in the case, including the captain of investigations and a lead investigator. This information led to Russ's retrial in February 2015. The Missouri Court of Appeal transferred the case back to the 45th Circuit Court, where a new judge, Stephen R., took over. He granted a new bench trial due to new evidence and released Russ on bond pending the trial. During the retrial, Russ was allowed to present incriminating evidence against Pam. Some police officers admitted that Pam had told them she saw Russ with another man in a car while she was dropping off Betsy. The CSI agent who handled the crime scene believed that Russ's blood-stained slippers were a setup, and that the blood stain was not from stepping in blood. Russ was acquitted of all charges and released on November 7, 2015. He later filed a lawsuit against ASI and 3 deputy sheriffs for ignoring exonerating evidence and fabricating evidence. In 2020, he was awarded a $2 million settlement. The case also led to repercussions for the officials involved. ASI faced a bar complaint, although it was rejected. She later announced that she was willing to cooperate with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Lincoln County Commissioner to review her conduct. Judge Christina Menem was suspended for misconduct in a different case and was voted out of office in 2018 for her role in the Farrier murder case. In 2019, Lincoln County appointed a new attorney, Mike Wood, who reopened the Betsy Farrier murder case. He confessed that the wrongful conviction of Russ had inspired him to take the job. Pam was eventually interrogated as a suspect in the murder, and was charged with first-degree murder. The new prosecutor, Wood, sought the death penalty due to the heinousness of the crime. Betsy Faria was brutally murdered, stabbed 55 times, and her wrist was almost completely severed. Detective Mike Wood condemned the act as animalistic and charged Pam Hupp with the crime. Wood had strong evidence against Pam, including a $150,000 life insurance policy that named her as the beneficiary just days before Betsy's death. Pam had promised to put the money in a trust fund for Betsy's daughter, but instead kept it for herself, claiming that Betsy had wanted her to have it. In an interview, Pam claimed that she and Betsy were lovers, but Wood believed she was lying. Pam had also loaned her son $120,000 from her company in 2021, contradicting her earlier claims. Wood was convinced that Pam murdered Betsy by stabbing her with a kitchen knife while she slept on the sofa. He believed Pam tried to make it look like a domestic violence incident by walking around the room with socks on. The evidence against Pam included a text message she sent to Betsy's phone at 7:20 p.m. claiming she was home, but her call records showed she was still at the Faria residence. The fact that Betsy was found lying on her side suggested to Wood that she was killed by someone she trusted. Pam pleaded not guilty of the crime, but her trial was delayed multiple times due to her attorney's death and other issues. Finally, in 2023, the trial was scheduled to start in 2025. Wood was not only determined to bring Pam to justice, but also criticized the Lincoln County prosecutors for mismanaging the case and showing bias against Russ Faria, Betsy's husband. He pointed out a 2015 destruction order that could have led to the destruction of evidence, which would have made it impossible for Russ to be released from prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Camilleri. Jessica Camilleri, the second daughter of Rita and Vince, an Australian Maltese couple, was born with a mild mental disability. Her IQ was between 55 and 60, placing her in the bottom 1% of the population. People with mild intellectual disability like Jessica learn to communicate and express themselves, but at a slower pace than others. They may take longer to develop skills like speaking, reading, writing, and math, but they can still adapt to daily life. Due to her condition, Jessica was slow in reaching developmental milestones like walking, talking, and coordinating movements. She started school much later than her peers, which made her a target for teasing, discomfort, and bullying from her classmates for being different. As a result, Jessica developed stress, anxiety, and anger, particularly towards females. She also struggled with intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by sudden, repeated outbursts of impulsive, aggressive, and violent behavior, as well as angry verbal eruptions that were disproportionate to the situation. At school, Jessica exhibited aggressive behavior towards both students and teachers, including a notable incident where she punched a male student and refused to release her grip, leading to her indefinite suspension and subsequent confinement at home under the care of her mother, Rita, who received a disability pension to support her. Jessica's behavioral issues were symptomatic of her intellectual disability and struggled with irrational outbursts of anger. Furthermore, she was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, a chronic brain condition that affects millions of children worldwide, making it challenging for her to regulate her behavior. In addition to these conditions, Jessica also suffered from severe bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and autism spectrum disorders, which impacted her judgment, self-awareness, and empathy towards others. She had obsessive tendencies, such as fixating on her three favorite numbers, 2, 3, and 5, each of which she associated with a specific color, yellow, green, and purple, respectively. Jessica would often repeat these numbers to generate random phone numbers, which she would then use to call and talk to men. In one instance, starting in 2018, she began harassing the staff of a meat company in Daylesford, England, even going so far as to threaten the owner's family, claiming she would decapitate them with a chainsaw. Jessica had a persistent fascination with horror movies, particularly the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She would spend hours rewatching disturbing videos, and this obsession often led to furious outbursts when her mother, Rita, tried to restrict her access to these films. Jessica and her mother lived together in a house in St. Clair, a suburb of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Jessica's father, Vince, had divorced Rita during her teenage years due to the strain their daughter's behavioral problems had put on their marriage. Jessica struggled with low self-esteem and a childish, naive outlook, but she also displayed strong narcissistic tendencies. Deep down, she felt she was one of a kind and entitled to special treatment due to her mental disability. This occasionally led her to be exploitative and egocentric. Despite this, Rita remained devoted to caring for her daughter, acknowledging her issues, but feeling a strong sense of responsibility to look after and protect her. Rita even went so far as to reach out and apologize to one of the recipients of Jessica's harassing phone calls, confessing that she was at a loss for how to manage her daughter's behavior. Jessica was very close to her mother, who dedicated her life to taking care of her and meeting all her needs. Instead of sending her to a psychiatric institution for full-time care, her mother chose to keep her at home. In fact, Rita's life revolved around Jessica. The tragic event of July 20th, 2019 was not a standalone incident. In the 6 years leading up to it, Jessica had been convicted twice for assaults that caused actual bodily harm. She had also physically attacked her aunt and her sister's mother-in-law by pulling their hair. But she avoided jail time and was always placed in the care of her mother, Rita, the one person who could tolerate her behavior. Jessica had also exhibited aggressive behavior towards women she encountered in the streets and shopping centers, lashing out at those she perceived as looking at her wrongly or making her feel ashamed. On one occasion, she was even barred from a doctor's office after becoming violent towards another patient in the waiting room due to paranoia. In early 2018, Jessica's aggressive behavior continued when she attacked a nurse during a hospital visit with her mother, Rita. As a result, she was admitted to a mental health unit for 9 days to treat a severe episode of mood disorder. She was prescribed lithium for her supposed bipolar disorder, along with antipsychotic medications. However, by the end of 2018, about 6 months before the tragic event, Jessica had stopped taking her medication and instead began using natural remedies to manage her conditions. Rita was at her wit's end and paid $2,500 to a medium on Queen Street in St. Mary's, a western suburb of Sydney, in a desperate bid to exorcise the demon she believed was possessing her daughter, Jessica. Despite her family and friends warning her about the dangers of living with Jessica, Rita remained adamant that her daughter wouldn't hurt anyone. According to Christy, Jessica's older sister, their mother Rita had a heart of gold, always putting others before herself, including Jessica, who continually refused to seek professional help. Rita's sister often voiced her concerns that Jessica might harm her, recognizing Rita's unconditional love for her daughter. However, Rita's motherly love made her oblivious to these warnings, even on the day before the tragic attack, when she had to take Jessica to a police station due to her threatening calls to strangers. Jessica felt humiliated by her mom in a parking lot after visiting her sister due to a stranger's brief presence. Later, when her mom refused to order food from Red Rooster, Jessica called the restaurant 3 times. She then demanded her mom call a doctor, but Jessica's erratic behavior scared him off. At wit's end, Rita called an ambulance to take Jessica to a mental health facility. On the night of July 20th, 2019, Jessica's most severe episode of rage was about to unfold. In a brutal attack, Jessica dragged her 57-year-old mother Rita by the hair to the kitchen of their own home. There, she savagely attacked Rita with 7 meat cleavers, 4 of which broke under the force of her blows. In total, Jessica stabbed Rita over 100 times in the head and neck, driven by a morbid curiosity fueled by her daily obsession with horror films. The autopsy revealed the full extent of Rita's injuries, which included massive trauma to her head and neck, and death by multiple stab wounds that resulted in decapitation at the second vertebrae in her upper neck. Furthermore, Rita's body showed over 90 defensive wounds, indicating that she was conscious for a significant part of the attack. Enduring extreme physical pain and emotional terror at the hands of her own daughter, whom she had lovingly cared for. Jessica's 4-year-old nephew, the son of her older sister Christy, was present during the attack. The boy had been in Rita's care for a few days due to Jessica's apparent improvement. However, he was forced to witness Jessica repeatedly stabbing his grandmother and ultimately decapitating her. When the boy tried to intervene, Jessica attacked him, causing a minor head injury. The traumatic scene was so disturbing that the young boy began vomiting in response. Jessica called the emergency number from her mother Rita's cell phone, confessing to her murder and claiming self-defense, stating that Rita had attacked her first. However, this was not true, and Jessica had actually committed the brutal act. In reality, after killing her mother, Jessica panicked and repeatedly stabbed Rita's lifeless body, ultimately decapitating her and inflicting over 100 wounds. She then dumped Rita's head in a nearby neighbor's front yard. When the police arrived at their St. Clair, Sydney home, Jessica was outside, her clothes stained with her mother's blood, holding a water bottle. She showed no remorse for her actions and was more concerned about her own fate. Jessica asked the police officers and detectives if it was possible to bring someone back to life after decapitation, believing in the possibility of medical miracles that could reattach her mother's head. The police officer responded that this idea was unrealistic, but Jessica insisted, thinking that doctors could perform miraculous surgeries and reattach her mother's head. She also inquired about the potential consequences of her actions, specifically asking if she would face the death penalty. Upon learning that Australia does not have capital punishment, Jessica felt relieved. Furthermore, Jessica confessed to the police that the idea of decapitating her mother came from the horror movies she obsessively watched. A police officer's body camera recorded a chilling conversation at the crime scene on July 20, 2019. At 11:43 p.m., the first responders described the scene as one of the most horrific they had ever seen. The next day, July 21, 2019, Jessica appeared in court but didn't apply for bail. A friend explained that this was not surprising, as Jessica probably didn't understand the bail process. After a trial that highlighted her long history of mental illness, Jessica was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020. She had pleaded not guilty to murder due to her disability. In early 2021, Jessica was sentenced to a maximum of 21 years and 7 months in prison. She will be eligible for parole after serving 16 years and 2 months, which would be September 19, 2035. The prosecutor argued that Rita's brutal murder was the culmination of a lifetime of escalating violence by Jessica, which started with hair-pulling and eventually led to a deadly explosive attack. The prosecutor also stated that Jessica posed a moderate to high risk of reoffending and remained a danger to the community. Christy, Jessica's older sister, said that Jessica had killed and butchered their mother, and for that, she could never forgive her. However, Rita's sister held a different view, hoping that Jessica would get the help she needed and that Rita could finally rest in peace, knowing that Jessica was being cared for by a system that had failed her when she was alive. The judge presiding over the case offered counseling services to the jury members, recognizing that the disturbing evidence they had heard could haunt them long after the trial. The judge also admitted that selecting a jury for Jessica's trial was difficult, as many people were reluctant to participate in a trial involving such a disturbing crime. The judge described Rita's murder as one of the most brutal and cruel cases of homicide a court could encounter, emphasizing that the crime's severity was exacerbated by its occurrence in the victim's own home. Jessica's lawyer revealed that his client had expressed regret in a letter to her family after the crime. In the letter, Jessica accepted responsibility for her mother's death, acknowledging that Rita had not provoked her and taking blame for her actions. However, one of the psychiatrists who evaluated Jessica noted that she struggled to communicate through social gestures and displayed a relatively flat affect. The psychiatrist found no evidence of schizophrenia or hallucinations in Jessica. The conclusion was that Jessica's risk factors could only be managed in the long term with a comprehensive mental health support plan. Since entering prison, Jessica has persistently caused trouble. Only 2 months after her arrival, on September 9, 2019, she got into a fight with another inmate over food trading and threw a teacup at them. Although she was charged with assault in local court the next day, she did not receive any additional punishment. On October 14, 2019, Jessica attacked another inmate, which resulted in her being placed in solitary confinement in her cell for 5 days. On November 3, 2019, she disobeyed an order, and on July 31, 2020, she damaged property, incurring a fine of $200 Australian dollars. Jessica was involved in another assault on November 21, 2020, which led to her being placed in solitary confinement for 7 days. In January 2021, she was convicted of common assault again, but did not receive any further punishment. Jessica has explained her behavior, saying that other prisoners make her life difficult, regardless of what she does or where she goes. She has also stated that prison life is tough and very different from the outside world. On May 15, 2023, Justice Peter Hamill of the Sydney Supreme Court rejected claims that Kaleri's original sentence was too harsh and that the judge who sentenced her had misjudged the severity of her crime. However, Justice Hamill did rule that Kaleri should be resentenced, a decision supported by Justices Christine Adamson and Richard Kavanaugh. The basis for this decision was Kaleri's bizarre behavior, including walking into the street with her mother's head and asking emergency responders if they could reattach it, which demonstrated how out of touch with reality her actions were. After considering the opinions of multiple psychiatrists and a psychologist, Justice Hamill found that Kaleri's intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder meant she only had a basic understanding of what was morally wrong. As a result, he ordered that she be resentenced to 16 years in prison, with a minimum of 12 years before being eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jassi and Mithu. In 1994, in the month of December, in the city of Jagraon, in the Ludhiana district of Punjab, a boy named Sukhender Singh Sidhu, his nickname was Mithu, after playing a kabaddi match, was standing at a rickshaw stand, waiting for a rickshaw to go back to his village. He had some friends with him who had come to support him during the match and to boost his morale. During that time in Punjab, there were some rickshaws like the ones you're seeing on your screen now. Kabaddi is a sport played between 2 teams in Punjab, where each player demonstrates their strength and smartness. Since Mithu was the #1 kabaddi player in his village, he was quite attractive and powerful. The rickshaw hadn't arrived at the stand yet, so Mithu and his friends were joking around. Suddenly, they noticed 3 women walking towards the rickshaw stand from the opposite road. As these 3 women approached, Mithu and his friends noticed that 2 of them were older, while the third one accompanying them was a very beautiful young girl. When the rickshaw arrived at the stand, all passengers got in, and the beautiful girl sat on the back seat, while Mithu stood behind the rickshaw. During this journey, Mithu noticed that the girl kept looking at him repeatedly, and his friends also noticed this. However, Mithu couldn't talk to the girl, and as soon as she arrived in her village, she got off the rickshaw with her family. Once again, she looked towards Mithu, and for the first time, their eyes met. Besides, she smiled when she looked at Mithu, and in response, Mithu also smiled. Then, both of them went their separate ways. When Mithu started doing some other work after reaching home, he heard a girl's voice screaming, "Please help, I need help." As soon as Mithu stepped out of the house, he saw that it was the same girl he had seen in the morning in the rickshaw and smiled at while she was leaving. After that, Mithu went to the girl, who had come on a scooter with her friend from her home. Here, Mithu first greeted the girl with a hi, and then tried to start the scooter, but deliberately didn't start it. Then, Mithu asked the girl her name and also told her his name. Actually, the girl's name was Jaswinder Kaur, but her nickname was Jassi. After that, Mithu said to the girl, "I want to talk to you." Hearing this, Jassi got confused because she didn't understand Mithu's words, so her friend who came with her translated Mithu's words into English for Jassi. Then, the girl also said something in English, but Mithu didn't understand English, so Jassi's friend became a translator from Mithu here as well. After that, Jassi said, "We'll meet in Jagran village tomorrow." In fact, this village was about 15 to 20 minutes away from Mithu's house. When they met at that time, Mithu would be around 20 to 22 years old, while Jassi would be 19 to 20 years old. In addition, Mithu was born into a family that earned their living by farming, and he had only studied up to high school and then chose kabaddi as a career. Besides, he also drove a rickshaw in his free time. The next day, Mithu gets ready and reaches the village of Jagran, and then, after some time, Jassi also arrives there. For some time, they talk to each other, and in the meantime, Jassi tells Mithu that she lives with her family in Canada and has come to spend the winter vacation at her maternal grandparents' house in India. Among the two women she was with yesterday, one was her mother named Malatka Sidhu, while the other woman with her was Jassi's maternal uncle's wife, meaning Jassi's aunt. Apart from this, that day, there was a little conversation between Jassi and Mithu, and then both went to their respective homes. But from that day on, these two meet regularly. Gradually, Mithu also realizes that Jassi's maternal grandparents' house is the wealthiest home in her neighboring village. Besides, Jassi's maternal home and Mithu's small two-room house were on the border of two villages, meaning Mithu's house was right behind Jassi's maternal grandparents' house, and Mithu knows this fact. After this idea, Jassi and Mithu eloped on March 15th, 1999, avoiding the scrutiny of their families, and got married in a Gurudwara, which is a place of worship for Sikhs. After the marriage, Jassi returns home as if everything is normal, and no one suspects anything. However, the relationship that Jassi's family had been considering for her breaks down for some reason. After staying in Punjab for 2 months and marrying Mithu, Jassi leaves for Canada with her family, but before leaving, she promises Mithu that she will come back soon. After going to Canada, Jassi and Mithu start talking to each other on the phone again, and by now, Mithu's house also had a telephone line installed. Months passed by in this way, but at the beginning of 2000, some relatives of Jassi who were in India come to know about Mithu and Jassi's marriage, and they immediately inform Jassi's parents in Canada. After this, their love story takes a sharp turn. From this point, Mithu's parents start pressuring him, while on the other hand, Jassi's mother and uncle begin pressuring her to break the marriage. However, neither Mithu agrees to it, nor does Jassi consent to breaking the marriage. Although Mithu is tempted by money, and Jassi is tempted by expensive things, cars, and the lure of a luxurious lifestyle, neither of them is willing to break the marriage. One day, Jassi's mother brought documents for Jassi to sign, so that Mithu could come to Canada. Jassi signed them all, unaware that the documents claimed Mithu had forced her into marriage and assaulted her. Later, Jassi came to Canada with her family. In reality, after Jassi signs this document, her family members send it to the India Punjab police, and based on it, an FIR First Information Report is registered against Mithu for abduction, forced marriage, illegal weapons possession, etc., and he is also arrested. After the arrest, Mithu is brutally beaten in jail and stays there for several months. Meanwhile, When Jassy fails to receive any response to Mithu's letters and is unable to contact him over the phone, she finally learns from a friend that Mithu had been jailed on charges of abduction, forced marriage, and other offenses. Here, Jassy discovers that her mother, Malat Kaur, had deceived her by obtaining her signature and implicating Mithu, causing significant difficulties for his family and friends. Furthermore, the Punjab police have arrested Mithu's family members from his home and imprisoned them as well. Then, a few days later, Mithu talks to Jassy, where he says to her, "If you wanted to divorce, Jassy, you could have just asked me. We got married with your consent, so why did you falsely accuse me?" After this, Jassy tells Mithu the whole story of how her mother and uncle got her to sign on the wrong paper deceitfully. But now, in Canada, Jassy was kept confined in her own home by her mother and uncle. But then one day, Jassy gets an opportunity and successfully manages to come to India with the help of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Then she comes to India and testifies in court that Mithu, his family, and his friends are all innocent. "I married Mithu of my own free will." After this statement, everyone, including Mithu, is released from jail. Then, Jassy stays in India for some time. This time, Jassy tells Mithu that she will never go back to Canada again. It is said that along with the police, Jassy's father and brother also helped her escape from home. Jassy had come to India and started living with her husband, but both of them also knew that Jassy's family members would not remain silent. That's why, as soon as Jassy arrives in India, Mithu takes her away from home, and they start living in hiding. Mithu took Jassy to her hometown in June 2000 while they were living at their home. Meanwhile, on June 12th, Mithu's family had organized a party in their village for Mithu and Jassy's wedding. So on June 8th, Jassy tells Mithu that she wants to go shopping. Initially, Mithu refuses because he knew there was still danger, so leaving the house wasn't right. But then, when Jassy sits at home upset, Mithu also feels maybe he did wrong. Jassy left her home in Canada to be with him, and he couldn't even take her shopping. After that, they both leave for the market in the afternoon. It takes them a bit longer to return home, so by the time they get back, it's already evening and the sun has set. Because of this, Mithu's family starts worrying about both of them. A while later, Mithu's family begins searching for them. However, during the search, they receive devastating news that shakes Mithu's family to the core. They find out that Mithu is in a very serious condition, admitted to the hospital, while there's no trace of Jassy. When Mithu's family members rush to the hospital, they find out that Mithu's condition is extremely serious, and he is unconscious. Jassy is not there. Then, after several hours, when Mithu regains consciousness, he first inquires about Jassy. Only then do they inform Mithu about Jassy. A few days later, when Mithu recovers, he explains the reason behind his condition. Mithu says that after reaching the market, Jassy did a lot of shopping, and then they both also had coffee together. Later, as they started returning home from the market, their scooter stopped on its own 3 or 4 times. Twice, he sought help from a mechanic, and once he encountered his friend on the way. However, when the scooter started for the 3rd time, they noticed that they were being followed by 2 people on another scooter. However, after following the scooter riders for some time, they went ahead. But as soon as Mithu turned towards his village, he saw a car in front of him. At first, he saw from a distance that there was no one near the car, but as soon as he approached the car, suddenly 5 to 6 men came out and stood in front of the scooter. One of them even attacked them, which caused blood to start oozing from Jassy's head. After that, Mithu held Jassy and started fighting back against those thugs. But then, one thug also attacked Mithu's head with a large rod from a nearby road. After that, Mithu became unconscious, and those thugs kept beating Mithu, and finally, thinking he was dead, threw him into the nearby drain. A few hours later, late at night, some laborers passing by noticed Mithu lying there, and they picked him up and took him to the hospital. After learning this story, everyone sets out to find Jassy. This information is also given to the police, and now the police also begin to search for Jassy. After filing cases of assault and abduction against unknown criminals, the next day, on June 9th, Jassy is found, but she was not alive. In fact, Jassy had also been murdered and thrown into a canal which was 45 kilometers away from her hometown. When Jassy's body is retrieved from there, it is discovered that someone had brutally strangled her to death. Additionally, Jassy's body bore dozens of deep wounds, indicating that she had been tortured cruelly before dying. When Jassy's body is found, the Punjab police also contacts Jassy's family. However, Jassy's mother Malota and uncle Surjit Singh both deny recognizing the deceased as Jassy. But Mithu and his family, along with Jassy's father and brother, confirm that the body is indeed Jassy's. Now, the key question was who had inflicted such severe beating on Mithu and who had brutally murdered Jassy. After Jassy's body was found, the charge of murder was added to the case, and the police embarked on the search for the criminals. During the search, the police managed to apprehend several major criminals in the vicinity based on suspicion. The police was so alert because although Jassy was Mithu's wife, she was actually a Canadian citizen. In the case of Jassy's death, suspicions quickly arose among certain individuals, and the police soon discovered who was involved in Jassy's murder. When the police rigorously interrogated these individuals, some criminals confessed to having committed Jassy's murder themselves and admitted to brutally beating Mithu as well. However, the question remains who instigated all of this. During the investigation, when the names of certain individuals come up, nobody trusts anyone. Anil Kumar, a gangster involved in this incident, implicates Inspector Jinder Singh of the Punjab police, claiming that he had given him a contract to kill Mithu a few days earlier. Now the police immediately start searching for Inspector Jinder Singh and manage to arrest him shortly after. When questioned by the police, Jinder Singh explains that he carried out the murder because he received a phone call from Darren Singh, Jassy's other uncle who resides in Punjab. Darren Singh promised him a group of 3 locks to kill Mithu. Now the police ask Anil Kumar why he killed Jassy when he was given the contract to kill Mithu. Upon revealing the truth, Anil Kumar and his accomplice leave everyone astonished. Anil Kumar explains that after beating Mithu, they thought he was dead, so they threw him into the nearby drain. Then, following Darren Singh's orders, they took Jassy to an empty farmhouse. As soon as Jassy regains consciousness upon entering the farmhouse, she begins to search for Mithu. Upon inquiry, the roughs inform her that Mithu is dead. Now he starts talking to Jassy's mother, Malia, who tells him to wait for a moment, and she will tell them what to do next. After this, Jassy's uncle and her mother have a conversation, and afterward, they called the roughs again and instruct them to beat up Jassy and threaten her, besides asking her to testify against Mithu and come back to Canada. Despite being beaten badly by the roughs, Jassy still refuses to return to Canada and testify against Mithu. After this, the roughs once again talk to Jassy's mother and tell her that Jassy is not willing to listen to them. After this, Jassy's mother tells the roughs that if Jassy doesn't listen to anything, they can kill her too. Initially, the roughs refused to do so because their deal was only to kill Mithu for 3 lakh rupees. But Jassy's uncle Surjit Singh says a separate 3 lakh rupees will be given to them for Jassy's murder. After that, the roughs brutally beat Jassy, attacking her body with swords, knives, and pieces of glass. Jassy is tortured badly, and finally, one of the roughs strangles her to death. Jassy dies, and her body is lifted and thrown into a distant canal. Following this revelation, 13 people, including Jassy's maternal uncle Darren Singh, who resides in India, are arrested in this murder case. They are charged with abduction and murder, among other offenses. Jassy's mother, Malat Kaur, and her uncle Surjit Singh, who live in Canada, are also considered prime suspects. Now, since the victim and the accused had relations in Canada as well, the trial of this case begins in both India and Canada. During the trial in India, it is proven that when Jassy refused to leave for Canada without Mithu, Jassy's mother Malat Kaur and uncle Surjit Singh planned that if Mithu is killed, Jassy will surely come back. After this, Surj Singh contacts his brother Darren Singh in India and assigns him the task of getting Mithu killed. Afterward, he contacts Inspector Jinder Singh of the Punjab Police and seeks his assistance in this matter. Following this, Inspector Jinder Singh arranges a meeting between Darren Singh and a contract killer named Anil Verma. Subsequently, Anil, along with his gang, executes this incident. After a lengthy trial on October 21, 2005, the Sangrur court sentences 11 out of 12 people as guilty. Among the convicted individuals are Jassi's other maternal uncle Darren Singh, Police Inspector Jinder Singh, and contract killer Anil Verma. However, as time progresses, these individuals challenge the verdict of the lower court in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, where almost all the accused are granted bail one by one. In the end, only Jassi's other maternal uncle Darren Singh, Inspector Jinder Singh, and contract killer Anil Kumar are deemed guilty and sentenced to imprisonment. However, all the convicted individuals challenged this decision of the High Court in the Supreme Court. Subsequently, proceedings begin here as well. And on April 16, 2015, Darren Singh is acquitted and discharged. However, the rest of the defendants do not receive relief from here, and their sentence remains upheld. Apart from this, before delving into what happens in the courts of Canada, let's take a step back in the case. Due to being severely injured in the attack, Mithu remains hospitalized for a long time. While staying in the hospital, Jassi's final rites are also performed. However, as soon as Mithu recovers and returns home from the hospital, a series of 7 cases are filed against him, one after another. There were some cases of illegal weapon possession with allegations of drug selling against Mithu, and pressure is also built by the police and Jassi's relatives to retract his statement and end the case. However, Mithu doesn't yield to anyone's persuasion and continues with the case. Meanwhile, in 2004, a woman accused Mithu of rape. Upon these allegations, Mithu is immediately arrested and sentenced to Lana Central Jail. Mithu stays in this jail for the next 4 years, but after 4 years, it is proven in court that the woman who accused Mithu of rape had connections with Jassi's maternal family, and she falsely accused Mithu for money. After this revelation, Mithu is released from jail after serving 4 years. However, despite this, there were still some cases pending against Mithu, and he continued to have dealings with the jail during this time. Besides Mithu, his brothers also faced different allegations, and behind these accusations was Jassi's uncle Seret Singh. When Mithu doesn't fear even fake cases and threats, around 2012, attempts are made to buy him off. In this case, Jassi's family offers Mithu 10 million rupees and a prime location of 14 acres of land to change their statement. However, Mithu remains steadfast and continues the fight for justice. Malak Kaur and Surjit Singh, the main suspects residing in Canada, were extradited to India for the trial of Jassi's murder case, which began on January 6, 2012 in Canada. The police in Maple Ridge arrested Jassi's mother, Malad Kaur, and her uncle Surjit Singh for conspiring against Jassi and arranging her murder. After 2 years, on September 9, 2014, the Supreme Court of British Columbia approves their extradition to India. Both suspects then appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, which stays the lower court's decision and starts a new trial. On September 8, 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada orders Malad Kaur and Surjit Singh to be sent back to India to face the charges. After the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada, 3 police officers from Punjab immediately depart for Canada to take the accused into custody. However, in the meantime, the accused once again file a petition for review against the court's decision. As a result, the Punjab police have to return empty-handed. Although the review petition provided temporary relief for a few months, finally, on December 11, 2018, the Supreme Court of Canada rejects the review petition, leading to their definitive extradition to India. After the completion of legal formalities, both accused were repatriated to India by Canadian authorities on January 24, 2019. Upon arrival in Delhi, they were immediately arrested and transported to Punjab. They appeared in court the next day, granted a 4-day remand, then sent to Kerala jail as the trial commenced in Sangrur court. A total of 23 witnesses are presented by the Punjab police, and in addition to this, the call details of Jassie's mother and uncle are also submitted as evidence in court. From the call details, it is revealed that Jassie's mother and uncle had spoken on the phone a total of 266 times with roughs before and on the day of Jassie's murder. Mithu waits patiently while Jassie's family endures the prolonged delay of justice over the past 23 years. The Punjab police have received praise, but Mithu's quest for Jassie's justice remains unmet. Humans are inherently doubtful and covetous beings. When confronted with perfection, their instinct is to seek out imperfections. In the absence of any, they often endeavor to fabricate them. The calamity to be recounted today was observed by a vast audience, yet no one was able to assist the seemingly flawless girl, who as a result became handicapped. Tsinghua University, often referred to as the Chinese Harvard, was hosting a distinguished performance in partnership with the Beijing Symphony Orchestra. This event held significant prominence. Gracefully attired pairs made their entrance into the majestic theater. Men in impeccably cut black suits adorned with gleaming cufflinks, and women in stunning full-length gowns clutching petite handbags. They exchanged smiles and engaged in polite conversations as they proceeded to their seats. Tsinghua University students poised to showcase their talent that evening faced immense pressure. One student, Zhu Ling, was confronting an especially daunting challenge. She was about to deliver a 6-minute solo poised to be the defining 6 minutes of her life. The audience potentially included professors, prospective future employers, and benefactors, all key figures for her career prospects. Heightening the stakes, any error or mishap was not an option. She needed to captivate them and leave a lasting impression with her performance. Her goal was to immerse herself in the rhythm and embody the essence of the ancient Chinese musical instrument, the jiken. Revered as the instrument of the wise and favored by literati and intellectuals, those who mastered it were invariably seen as genial and perceptive. The jiken, a symbol of prestige, boasts a rich history. One of these venerable instruments from the Song dynasty fetched $22 million, ranking it among the most valuable. To soothe Ling's nerves, numerous friends positioned themselves near the stage, their anxiety nearly matching hers, having witnessed all she had endured over the past 2 months. For this moment, Zhu Ling's entire existence up to now had been devoted to these 6 minutes. She had almost jeopardized her well-being for this event. Her nerves were so frayed that in 3 days preceding her solo, she scarcely consumed any food. Stress-induced stomach pains plagued her, and sleep was elusive, making it hard for her to keep her eyes. Her vision began to blur. Finally, Zhu Ling ascended the stage, greeted the audience with a bow, sat down, and commenced playing the guqin. In those initial moments, her friends held their breath. But soon, the tension eased, and they found themselves enveloped in the music. Zhu Ling's stage presence that evening betrayed no sign of her nerves. She seemed to become one with the melody. Her hands glided effortlessly, coaxing out exquisite sounds that resonated throughout the theater. Some of her friends were even brought to tears. It appeared that Zhu Ling had channeled all her accumulated stress and anxiety of the past 2 months into her performance, transforming it into a form of emotional release. As the 6 minutes concluded, the audience burst into applause. Zhu Ling gave a deep bow, offered a smile, and exited the stage. Unbeknownst to her, her best friend was in the crowd smiling broadly and clapping so vigorously that her hands turned red. Yet her expression also showed a hint of nervousness. That night, Zhu Ling opted out of the festivities to return home and rest. The dissipation of stress left her feeling utterly drained. In the shower, she began washing her hair calmly. Glancing at her hand, she noticed a clump of hair passing through it. Running her hand through her hair again brought a sense of urgency. She pulled back the shower curtain and dashed to the mirror. Her reflection revealed an exhausted face, and small irregular bald spots resembling the aftermath of a carelessly wielded razor. This was merely the onset. In the following weeks, Juling Ling's condition would deteriorate further, leaving her confined to a wheelchair and bereft of ability, unable to move, speak, or even control facial muscles. She transformed from a highly promising Tsinghua University student into someone with the cognitive capacity of a 6-year-old child. This entire wasn't an illness, nor was it a genetic anomaly. Juling was experiencing something caused by another individual. For ordinary students, gaining admission to Harvard was more likely than to Tsinghua, especially for those native to China. The local acceptance rate stands at a mere 0.4%, making it more accessible to international students. The university operates on an annual budget of $5 billion. It's an institution where influential political figures' daughters and wealthy businessmen's sons receive their education. Each of them is exceptionally intelligent and well-educated, with high intellectual capacities. The real challenge isn't just in securing admission, it's surviving the intense competition and rivalry among the students. Some alumni have admitted that to stay at the forefront, they engaged in various manipulations, betraying comrades, engaging in deceit, and stabbing others in the back, all driven by the unyielding competitive spirit fostered at this institution. In 1994, Juling was among the 31 chemistry undergraduates at Tsinghua University. She ranked in the top 3 of her cohort, which consisted of 20 males and 11 females. Juling was often regarded as the epitome of excellence, the cream of the crop among students. Indeed, Juling was not only intelligent, but also tall and striking in appearance. Everyone foresaw a bright future for her, destined for significant accomplishments. Juling also had a charismatic and assured presence. Her arrival in the dormitory sparked envy among others. She had a knack for attracting a circle of friends and admirers, thanks to her warm demeanor towards others. She roamed the campus, attended lectures diligently, completed her assignments, and many marveled at her seemingly boundless energy. However, after a few months, a peculiar and unexplainable decline in Juling's condition began to be observed by all. She appeared less strained, even during graduation week. But suddenly, Juling seemed to vanish. She began arriving later than her peers and consistently looked exhausted in lectures. Sitting there, she'd sweat as if overheating. Juling struggled to concentrate on the class content. Severe stomach pain plagued her, leading many, including her instructors, to believe it was stress-related. Seeking relief, Juling went to the school clinic for pain relievers, but they provided minimal respite. What started as minor lateness escalated to her ceasing classes entirely. Concerned friends decided to visit her dormitory, which she shared with 3 other girls. They found her in bed, shivering and moaning in agony, with clumps of dark hair scattered on the pillow. Alarmed, her classmates urged her to consult a physician, but Juling dismissed their concerns. She insisted she was merely stressed and would return to classes the next day, assuring them that everything would normalize by semester's end. The once impeccable Juling was now unrecognizable. Her complexion had turned ghostly pale, lips took on a purplish tint. She resembled a specter haunting the campus. Her movements were sluggish. Each step seemed to inflict excruciating pain. Most of her hair had shed, leaving her nearly bald and compelling her always to wear something on her head for concealment. Occasionally, Juling's vision would blur, leading to temporary blindness for hours at a time. Various hypotheses regarding Juling's deteriorating condition spread across campus. Some conjectured it might be due to illnesses like cancer or alopecia, known for causing hair loss, or perhaps an autoimmune disorder. Yet darker speculations emerged. Many students linked Juling's decline to stress stemming from a dispute with her close friend Sunny. It seemed oddly coincidental that the change in Juling coincided with their falling out. After missing an orchestra rehearsal for a challenging piece, Juling faced unexpectedly harsh criticism. Sunny Fly informed the instructor that Juling had skipped because she felt overly skilled, implying the others needed to elevate their abilities to match hers. Realizing such maliciousness in real life was quite overwhelming for Juling. Different speculations circulated among university students. Some hinted that Zhu Ling, being a chemistry student, might be secretly conducting groundbreaking experiments. However, would a highly driven student risk self-harm? Beijing A, from Peking University and a friend since middle school, decided to visit her in the hospital with a fruit basket. On entering her room, Beijing was stunned and compelled to flee. It wasn't fear of infection, but rather seeing his classmate in such a dire state that overwhelmed him. How could a vibrant 20-year-old transform into this shadow so quickly? What illness could strip Zhu Ling of all she had worked for? The medical team found her condition baffling. Just months earlier, Zhu Ling had been in peak health. Now she lay almost hairless, connected to multiple machines with tubes protruding from her nose and mouth. Her body convulsed and face showed partial paralysis. A look of silent desperation marked her wide eyes. The sight was distressing. Even the slightest touch caused excruciating pain and more erratic movements. It seemed even her hospital gown tormented her skin. Sensing his friend's silent plea for help, Beijing read the desperate message in her eyes, a look he would never forget. Seeking answers alongside Zhu Ling's parents, Beijing probed the doctors for a diagnosis, but they were equally perplexed. They delved into the onset of her illness. Initially, about a month or two earlier, Zhu Ling experienced stomach aches, resembling spasms which came and went unpredictably within a week. The pain intensified to the point that it forced her to bend over in agony. Often, she would lay on the ground curled up in a fetal position. Initially, her remedy involved consuming large amounts of Chinese herbal tea. Yet, the pain escalated, eventually causing her to lose consciousness. Zhu Ling, burdened by her demanding university schedule, delayed seeking medical attention, hoping the symptoms would subside. Then, her vision began failing intermittently, first blurring and then completely vanishing for hours. Subsequently, her hair started falling out, an especially traumatic symptom for any young woman. The situation deteriorated further, leading to her hospitalization just days before Christmas. It was her first time in hospital care. During that month, her parents remained steadfast by her side as she received treatment. The medical team tested her for arsenic and mercury poisoning. However, the results showed nothing abnormal. Intriguingly, a doctor from a different hospital recalled a similar poisoning case from the 1960s and suggested the possibility of thallium poisoning. However, Zhu Ling denied any exposure to thallium in her studies. The hospital then reached out to Tsinghua University to investigate which chemical substances Zhu Ling might have encountered in her capacity as a chemistry student. Despite this inquiry, her medical records revealed no exposure to chemicals that could trigger such symptoms. This left her condition an enigma to the medical staff. Remarkably, after a month, Zhu Ling's health appeared to improve, and she requested permission to resume her studies. She was eager to sit for exams and anxious not to waste the entire semester. Her parents were adamantly opposed to her returning to university, fearing that stress was the underlying cause of her illness. Yet, Zhu Ling feigned significant recovery and went back to classes in February. Unfortunately, by March, her condition had deteriorated dramatically again, resulting in readmission to the hospital. This time, so debilitated that continued university attendance seemed impossible. She couldn't even speak. Jen, disillusioned with the local medical community's inability to provide answers, took the initiative. He reached out to medical experts not just in China, but globally. Zhu Ling's symptoms were translated various languages, and he posted these on specialized medical forums online. In less than half an hour, he received his response. Over the next few days, around 2,000 emails poured in from 18 different countries. The respondents weren't mere internet users. Many were affiliated with national medical institutions and specialized in toxicology. The consensus among almost all of them was alarming: thallium poisoning. The symptoms pointed to a deliberate, methodical attempt to poison Zhu Ling, designed to inflict slow, excruciating agony. Thallium, a dense and highly poisonous metal, was once used in rat poisons, but has been banned in major countries including China and the USA. In the early 20th century, it was used as a lice treatment, known to cause hair loss. Its array of symptoms is so vast that it often leads to misdiagnosis by doctors, and its detection is usually alarmingly delayed. Thallium doesn't leave visible marks like bruises or wounds, making it harder to spot. The poisoning unfolds in stages. Initial stomach discomfort escalates to severe pain, then trembling, headaches, insomnia, and temporary blindness. Subsequently, the victim experiences intense skin pain, akin to severe burns, where even the slightest touch feels excruciating. Clothing and bed linens become sources of torment. The final stage involves neurological symptoms, including involuntary motor disturbances, seizures, and partial or complete paralysis, culminating in cognitive decline and mental impairment. Tragically, in Zhu Ling's case, this meant a regression from a top student at China's most prestigious university to possessing the mental capacities of a 6-year-old child. BG Zhen, in collaboration with Zhu Ling's parents, sifted through the multitude of emails and promptly conveyed their findings to Zhu Ling's medical team. Yet the doctors were skeptical of the diagnosis posited by online contributors. They emphasized that detecting thallium in the body without specific tests was not feasible. Testing for thallium involved sending the patient's blood to a lab equipped for such an analysis. Moreover, they pointed out that thallium is a rare, tightly controlled substance, not easily obtainable. The doctors also mentioned that if Zhu Ling's condition was indeed due to thallium poisoning, an antidote would likely be ineffective at this advanced stage of the disease. This revelation left Zhu Ling's family and friends in shock. The pressing question then became, who would want to harm Zhu Ling? A hypothesis emerged that the intended targets might have been her parents, given their high-profile occupations. Her father was a senior engineer at the national agency, a position that could involve sensitive information. Her mother was an engineer at a prominent Chinese company. However, this line of inquiry eventually reached a dead end. The primary task was to determine how the poison entered Zhu Ling's system, especially since no one else on campus exhibited similar symptoms. This ruled out the possibility of thallium vapors, suggesting that Zhu Ling either ingested or came into direct contact with the substance. Meanwhile, during Zhu Ling's hospitalization, her personal items were mysteriously stolen from her dormitory. The stolen items included her shampoo, contact lens case, lipstick, bath soap, and even her water glass. Intriguingly, the perpetrator seemed solely interested in Zhu Ling's possessions, an unusual incident in such a prestigious university's dormitory. With no surveillance cameras on campus at that time, an investigation was imperative. Students lived in gender-specific rooms, and access to the women's dormitory was restricted to current female students of Singer University. Neither alumni nor graduate students or professors had entry into the living quarters of over 100 young female students. Police initiated a thorough investigation into over 20 vendors known to supply thallium, a substance still used in manufacturing optical lenses, electronics, and other products. Scrutinizing their procurement records, they discovered that one supplier had provided alum to Tsinghua University's chemistry department for research. The investigation revealed that only a select group within the university had access to this compound: 2 professors, 3 graduate students, and 2 senior undergraduates. Consequently, the perpetrator likely had a role in thallium-based experiments and had the opportunity to take personal items from Zhu Ling's room. As the investigation progressed, the professors and graduate students were quickly excluded as suspects due to their lack of access to the women's dormitory. This narrowed suspicion to the 2 senior students, 1 male and 1 female. Since the male student couldn't have entered the female residence area, suspicion fell on the female student. Astonishingly, this student was none other than Sunwei, also known as Sunny. She was not only Zhu Ling's best friend and roommate, but now the prime suspect in her attempted murder. The situation posed a baffling question. Why would Sunny, with a bright future ahead, risk everything in such a serious manner? Acquaintances of both young women mentioned that Zhu Ling had recently triumphed over Sunny in the student elections. Sunny was not known for tolerating defeat gracefully. She possessed an argumentative nature, and had deceived her closest companion on several occasions. As Zhu Ling advanced and received greater acclaim, Sunny grew progressively more agitated. Zhu Ling's individual performance at the Beijing Philharmonic served as a catalyst for tension in their relationship. Zhu Ling was attractive, highly skilled, and esteemed by both peers and faculty members alike. This probably fueled Sunny's jealousy even more. Sun Wei was questioned for 8 hours straight before her parents came to take her home. Her family had significant influence at Tsinghua University. Her father played a key role in the Democratic Revolutionary Committee, and her grandfather was a former vice chairman. Many of her relatives held positions in government or academic roles at top state universities. Consequently, Zhu Ling's case remained unresolved for quite some time. Sun Wei, one of the primary individuals associated with the incident, maintained her innocence. She claimed that the police had cleared her of any suspicion. Regardless, Sun Wei legally changed her name and birth date, married an American, and relocated to the US, where she lived without restrictions. Meanwhile, Ling's diagnosis came too late. It was eventually confirmed that thallium had caused her mysterious illness. By the time it was detected, the levels of thallium in her body were extraordinarily high. The antidote, Prussian blue, proved ineffective due to the advanced stage of poisoning. Ling was declared permanently disabled with irreversible nerve damage. She now has a child's mental capacity, experiences facial paralysis, and is bound to a wheelchair. Later on, Ling's family received $14,000 from the hospital due to misdiagnosis and mishandling of her case. The closure of the case by the police occurred quietly, without notifying Ling's family, which only added to their tragedy and suspicions. Zhu Ling lived until she was 50 years old before passing away. Her parents found solace in the fact that she could live so long in such a state. Unfortunately, the individual responsible for her condition was never brought to justice.
July 28, 1996, was a normal summer day in South England. Captain John Copic and his son readied themselves for a day of fishing on their Brixham trawler, Mulcahy. After a day of unsuccessful hauls, father and son ventured further into a place called the Roughs. After weighing down the mad and tossing it overboard, they waited. Both men felt the familiar drag of a heavy catch. Copic assumed they must have caught a big fish and decided it was time to bring the net back to the surface. However, it was not a fish. Scrummed, the men watched as the dead body of a man flopped onto their deck. Copic immediately alerted the Brixham Coast Guard. The body was badly decomposed. It had been in the ocean for some time. It had been nibbled on by fish, but was impeccably dressed in a long-sleeve shirt, corduroy pants, and brown shoes. Police noted that his pockets had been turned out. There was no identification on him. The only identifying features on the John Doe were a badly smudged tattoo on his right hand and a Rolex watch on his wrist. The body was transported to the medical examiner's office in Devon. The man was estimated to be between 40 and 50 years old. The tattoo looked like a cluster of stars. The only serious injury had been to his head. It was not fatal, and Matt, along with other bruising, seemed consistent with being dragged along the seabed before being pulled up into the boat. His lungs were filled with water. It was ruled a drowning, a common occurrence in the area given the English Channel was just off the coastline. Police believed he may have fallen overboard during one of the ferry crossings. The only other possible way forward was to identify him through dental records. If he was a British citizen, they'd be on record, and so the examiner did just that, but it would take a while. It was by chance a mortuary technician noticed the man's watch. It was a Rolex Oyster self-winding watch that was fully waterproof and required motion to remain active for 48 hours at a time. It was also possible to trace the ownership if it was an original. Examining the watch, investigators were able to determine that the man had drowned on July 20, 1996, as the calendar feature showed the date July 22nd. They were also able to find a hidden serial number between the wristband and watch face. This number was sent off to Rolex to determine if it was an original and had been serviced by the owner. In the meantime, the John Doe was dubbed the Rolex Man. and the mystery deepened. Several weeks later, through records kept by Rolex, investigators received a name: Ronald Joseph Platt. The medical examiner also received the dental records to corroborate this evidence. Ronald Joseph Platt was a 51-year-old TV repairman. Records state that he was born in Calgary, Canada in 1945, before his family moved to Britain. He was unmarried and had once served as a soldier in the British Army as part of his national service. Close friends described him as a quiet and introverted man who had a passion for his native country, Canada. He was also interested in electronics and precision engineering, something which led to him buying a Rolex in Germany in 1967. It was one of his most prized possessions, and his ex-partners said Platt would not even take his watch off to shower. Using this information, investigators needed to find out exactly who Platt was and how he ended up tangled in a fishing trawler. Detective Constable Ian Clenahan of the Devon and Cornwall Police was assigned to the case from the initial discovery. Police were able to discover that Platt's last known address was in Essex, hundreds of miles from where his body was found. Clenahan made contact with the Essex Police Department. Detective Sergeant Peter Redman offered to visit the address to help with the case. When Redman visited the property, it was vacant. Redman contacted the landlord to explain that the owner had moved some time ago, but provided the detective with a reference letter. The letter contained the forwarding address and contact number of one David Davis. Calling the number provided, Redman was able to reach out to Davis. The detective inquired about Platt and Davis's relationship before explaining that the body they discovered in Devon was possibly that of his friend. Davis agreed to pay the Essex police a visit. Redman met with Davis and found him to be an amiable person who seemed quite confident. However, he was quiet and did not ask many questions about Platt's death or discovery. When prompted, Davis explained that he and Platt had been friends for several years. Davis told Redman that he hadn't seen Platt in over 3 months. The last time they'd met, he'd loaned him money to start an electrical business in France. As far as Davis knew, Platt had been living in France all this time. During the interview, Redman learned that the tattoo on Platt's hand was in fact a maple leaf, the national symbol of Canada. Davis explained Platt's love for the country. Having given all the information he could, Davis left the station, promising to send Detective Redman a photo of Platt. Days later, Redman received the photo as promised. Police in Essex were able to wrap up the investigation on their end, landing on the theory that Platt fell overboard and drowned along the channel. This fit the story told by Davis. It was just an unfortunate accident. As the Essex case wrapped up, Clenahan needed to tie up the loose end on his side. He tried contacting Davis several times, but was unsuccessful. He turned to his colleague Redman in Essex to help make contact with Davis. Agreeing to this, Redman paid Davis a visit at his home in Woodham Walter. It was a rural part of Essex with only 4 houses. These houses were not numbered traditionally, but rather each had a name. He knocked on the first door and an elderly couple answered. When they asked Redman who he was looking for, he gave them the name David Davis. The couple then informed him the neighbor was not Davis, but Ron Platt. They went on to describe Platt to Redman, and he realized that they were talking about the same man he had met with previously. Redman knew something was wrong here. He contacted Clenahan back in Devon and explained how, by sheer chance, he just unmasked another chapter to the story. Detectives from both counties now knew there was more to the story than met the eye. Redman started focusing on gathering information about the man who was posing as his dead friend. He revisited the elderly couple he came to know as Frank and Aubrey. They told him the tale of Ron Platt and his rather young wife and 2 little children. They also mentioned that Platt and his family had often vacationed in Devon as they had a yacht down there. The name, though, escaped them. In Devon, Clenahan too started re-examining the evidence and began by questioning old witnesses. His first stop was John Kopic. When questioned, Kopic told him that the neck dragged up a 10-pound anchor along with Platt's body. Kopic gave the anchor to a friend, who then gave it to his mother to sell. Fortunately, the anchor remained unsold, and investigators were able to retrieve and bag the anchor as evidence. For Clenahan, the next stop was interviewing those who knew Platt. He contacted Platt's brother Brian, who told them about Elaine Boyes. Boyes was Platt's ex-partner. They'd been together for 13 years. Investigators paid Boyes a visit and discovered the connection between Platt and Davis. Boyes met Davis in 1991 while working as a receptionist at a fine arts auctioneer in Harrogate, England. She remembered Davis being tall, engaging, and charming. They spoke about Davis moving to Yorkshire, and the topic veered toward employment. Davis wanted Boyes to work for his company. She explained that it wouldn't be for long, as she and Platt were planning on relocating to Canada. Charming his way in, Davis told Boyes that he could help her and Platt save up to make the move to Canada. It was not long before Boyes began working as an executive assistant for Davis. She then introduced Platt to Davis, and the two men developed a fast friendship. The couple were mesmerized by Davis's grandiose stories and admired his lavish lifestyle. Davis made them an offer to be directors of his company, the Cavendish Corporation. Initially, Boyes was hesitant about the offer. Davis explained his reasons for not wanting to have his name linked to the business. He alleged that his ex-wife was a wealthy doctor living in New York who still demanded he pay alimony. By now, the couple developed a trusting relationship with Davis and believed their friend was truly trying to keep his wife at bay. Davis had both Boyes and Platt traveling to Europe to broker deals for him and slowly pulled them into the web he was weaving. They deposited money for him into various foreign bank accounts, never questioning David or his motives. He was trustworthy, a man of religion, and in their eyes, infallible. On Christmas Day, 1992, Davis invited the couple to spend the day with them and his daughter, Noelle. After enjoying the hearty meal, they sat down to exchange gifts. Boyes' car was the ultimate gift. Davis had made a promise to buy the couple 2 tickets to Canada if they were willing to use them before February 1993. For Boyes, it seemed a bit overwhelming with a short notice, but Platt was on cloud 9. His lifelong dream of returning to Canada was being realized thanks to this generous man he had come to call a true friend. Davis convinced them that it was better they get a start on their new life sooner than later. Davis wasted no time in preparing for their imminent departure. He suggested to both Boyes and Platt to have rubber stamps of their signatures made in case he needed to sign any documents urgently. He'd also keep their driver's licenses with him in case proof of identity was required. This didn't seem a tall order for the couple because they trusted Davis, saying he'd just given them the start they needed. And so, in February of 1993, Boyes and Platt jetted off to Canada to begin their new lives. Canada did not offer the greener grass that the couple had expected. They'd landed in the country in the middle of winter. Work was scarce, and financial troubles soon turned into relationship problems. Boyes and Platt tried to make it work, but the growing tension created a rift, and they soon drifted apart. 5 months later, Boyes returned to England to attend her sister's wedding as a bridesmaid. She had no intention of returning to Canada. Having become family friends, Davis was also invited to the wedding. There, he spoke to Boyes and inquired after Platt. He was upset after hearing that Boyes was not returning to Canada and that she and Platt had ended their relationship. Davis tried convincing Boyes to give Platt in Canada a second chance. When she refused, Davis suddenly changed tactics. He soon packed up his life and family and left Boyes with a mobile number. Their friendship dissolved, and soon the calls disappeared as well. Platt and Boyes, too, were no longer in contact. Since leaving Canada, she'd not had any contact with her ex-lover Platt or her once dear friend Davis. So when Davis contacted Boyes late in 1996, she didn't think much of the impromptu conversation, as they barely had anything to say to each other after all that time. He mentioned nothing about Platt, and that was that. He failed to inform her that Platt was dead. After the interview was over, Boyes told police she now had her suspicions that Davis was somehow involved in Platt's death. Boyes provided the vital link between Davis and Platt, but investigators needed more definitive clues. They began talking to witnesses. After the wedding in Harrogate, Davis made a quick escape with his family to Devon. There, he began introducing himself as Ron Platt. His daughter was pregnant, and so he introduced people to her as his wife, sometimes calling her Elaine Boyes, other times Noelle Platt. It was also common knowledge that Davis owned a yacht. Adding further suspicion was that witnesses said they had seen Platt and Davis together a month before Platt's body was discovered. They'd allegedly booked into the Steam Packet Inn as brothers David and Ronald Platt. By now, police knew Davis was lying about Platt and his knowledge about his death. They needed a final bit of evidence, though. Looking into mobile records, Davis's number showed that calls had been made from the same area that the medical examiner estimated the drowning of Platt occurred. Essex police planned a sting operation to arrest Davis on suspicion of Platt's murder. They waited for him to arrive at the Chelmsford train station after being tipped off by boys who agreed to meet Davis for coffee. He, however, evaded them. Redmond, though, was tenacious and decided to drive by the family home. There he noticed activity, but he did not pounce immediately, calling for backup instead. There was the assumption that Davis might be armed. As they prepared to make their move, a taxi pulled up to the driveway and Davis made a quick getaway as the taxi sped off. Police gave chase and Davis was eventually apprehended. With a gun trained on him, Davis surrendered without incident. Little did police know this was only the tip of the iceberg. Davis was arrested and his fingerprints taken. Running them through an international database revealed another twist to an already thickening plot. The prints came back belonging to a man named Albert Johnson Walker. He was ranked number 4 on Interpol's wanted list and was Canada's most wanted fugitive. Walker's story begins in Canada 6 years before Platt's body was discovered in the Atlantic Ocean. Born in Hamilton, Ontario on August 9, 1945, Walker always dreamed big. He was a high school dropout with a larger-than-life presence. He worked as a bank teller and spent much of his free time socializing in Ontario. It was during a social event he met his ex-wife, Barbara MacDonald. After a whirlwind romance spanning all of 4 days, he proposed to her and they married in 1968. They started a family early, having 3 girls and 4 boys. They raised the family in Paris, Ontario. After years of helping other people with financial solutions, Walker started a freelance bookkeeping business with Barbara. Business thrived, and within 10 years he was operating 6 branches, employing over 30 people. Friends eagerly invested with him. All the while, he was siphoning their money into offshore accounts in both the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Soon, the cracks started to appear. His marriage broke down following his numerous affairs. The people he was stealing from started asking questions, and in 1990, Walker decided it was time to leave before it all blew up. Telling friends he was taking their then 15-year-old daughter, Sheena, for a skiing trip to Europe, he made his escape. Barbara realized what was going on and, fearing for her daughter's safety, declared her a missing person. Police were on his trail, but it abruptly ended in London. He adopted a new identity stolen from a client. He was now going by David Wallace Davis, and Sheena became Noel. Although he evaded authorities, the name David Davis still linked him back to his true identity. He needed to find a new identity, and the opportunity presented himself when he met Ronald Platt. Platt kept a very small circle of friends and was obsessed with living in Canada. Walker used this knowledge to his advantage. The wheels were in motion, and Walker finally had the identity he needed. But plans fell through when Platt contacted Walker in 1995. Life in Canada was not the dream he foresaw. He informed Walker that he was moving back to Essex to settle near Davis. The solid foundation Walker was curating started to, again, crack at the edges. Having 2 Ronald Platts in the same area with the same birth details was not going to work well for Walker. So he hatched a plan. Walker had purchased a yacht and named her Lady Jane. He had taken his family and Platt down to Tutney's in Devon to celebrate the launch of the vessel. While there, the men purchased a new 10-pound anchor, which, ironically, became vital evidence in the investigation. After returning to Essex, Walker invited Platt for another weekend down in Devon, just 2 friends enjoying the coast and some fishing. Walker sailed the Lady Jane out into open water, a safe distance from any onlookers on shore. He then hit Platt over the head with the anchor, knocking him unconscious. Walker rummaged through his pockets to remove any identification before securing the anchor to his belt and tossing him over to a water grave. It was the perfect murder. Except Walker made one crucial mistake. He forgot to remove the Rolex that unraveled a finely executed plot to escape justice. Walker's trial began in 1998. Evidence presented to the court included the anchor that was discovered in the net with Platt's body. Forensic experts were able to determine that the injury on Platt's head was consistent with the shape of the anchor. There were also traces of zinc found on the belt of the pants that were consistent with zinc on the anchor. Walker weighed Platt down by securing it to his belt. A search of Lady Jane yielded more physical evidence. Hairs matching Platt were found on a cushion beyond. Platt's fingerprint was found on the carrier bag used to carry the anchor back to Lady Jane. Blood was found near the rails. At his home, Walker's habit of courting did him in, as documents were confiscated and used to prove his bogus business enterprises and trail of deception. It was, however, the testimonies of both Foyes and Sheena that were to be the final nails in his coffin. Foyes' testimony provided the court with evidence that Walker had much to lose if Ron Platt returned to England. Sheena, however, delivered the final blow. She was unable to provide a solid alibi for Walker on the weekend of the murder. She also confirmed he had been out on the yacht and looked disheveled and agitated when he returned late on the day of the murder. Sheena's testimony opened an entirely new chapter of the saga. She told the court of her life living in fear with her father, his ability to charm, and how she felt as much of a victim as anyone else who crossed his path. When Walker took the stand, he presented a very charming persona to the court. He said that Sheena begged him to take her along. He admitted to fraud and to other crimes, but denied killing Platt. The blood found on the yacht was due to Platt bumping his head while they were out fishing, he said. Yet the jury saw through the lies and took just 2 hours to find him guilty. High Court Justice Neil Butterfield addressed Walker, stating, "The killing was carefully planned and cunningly executed with chilling efficiency. You are a plausible, intelligent, and ruthless man who poses a serious threat to anyone who stands in your way." He was sentenced to 15 years to life. In 2005, he was allowed to return to Canada to serve out a sentence. In 2007, aged 61, he was given an additional 4 years to run concurrently with his sentence. In 2015, he filed an application for parole, but withdrew it at the last moment. Now, at age 75, the Parole Board of Canada has denied him his freedom by revoking his application for day and full parole. He was also denied his request to go to Vancouver Island unaccompanied or a personal development program. It's likely he will never taste freedom again. Walker did, indeed, execute an almost perfect crime. However, karma has a way of catching up. Had it not been for Rollo Platt's genuine Rolex and a string of events that occurred by sheer chance, he may have gotten away with it.